What's up, everyone? This is your host, Ghost, coming to you live. Another wonderful video. How is everyone doing today? I don't know if that came through earlier. I apologize if it did and blew your ears out. I was trying to do OBS and stream through that way. I am inept in the OBS ness. Yeah. So if it blew out your ears, I apologize for all that. I was just trying to figure, I wanted to try and do something else. Um, Unfortunately, it's not doesn't work. Um, because I don't think that ended up working. I was trying to be able to play some stuff through my stream deck that I have. Didn't quite work. So that was unfortunate. But I'll double check, see if that actually didn't work. So just bear with me, and we'll get to the show here real quick. All right. So I don't know if that actually worked. I gotta wait for my stream to catch up. Okay, yeah. So it didn't work. Like I said, I'm trying to be able to do noises and stuff like that through my stream deck and everything, but I haven't quite figured it out. I am inept at this stuff, and I rarely have any time to devote to trying to figure all this stuff out. It works perfectly well through OBS, but for some reason, it plays like multiples all at once instead of just one single sound. So just got to figure that out. And then I think I'm gonna have to buy a second camera at some point so I can have the same quality. But whatever. I'll stick with my Logitech one. No big deal. But I don't know what the screeching was happened. If you heard that, I apologize. Anyways, what are we gonna do today? Well, we're gonna check out the Destiny debate. No. Let's make this accurate. The debate of Andrew Wilson, the debate that Andrew Wilson performed. Yeah. The debate that Andrew Wilson did during just did yesterday with Destiny. That is the more, I would say, accurate statement. Yeah, hold on. Okay. All right. No big deal. Anyways, I'm getting distracted. So yeah, we're gonna watch that debate. I have already watched it. So just to be fair, let y'all know I have watched it. I only watched it the one time yesterday. I've had my thoughts about the whole thing, and we'll get to it. I think unequivocally Andrew Wilson ended up winning, but I'll leave that up to you to decide if you agree or not. I'll probably periodically pause it, give my thoughts on a certain thing, and otherwise I'll just let it run. What you're about to see is an actual debate. And why I say that is I think we've gotten to the point where we think debate and all of we think, a bunch of people talking over each other, arguing, and blah, blah, blah. But what we're about to witness is a legit debate. Like if you took a debate class, this probably be the format you would see for that debate. So Myron's giving a time limit. He's giving a 5-minute opening, I think. Time limit for a 5-minute opening for both sides, and then a 3-minute where back 3-minute that they can go and express themselves and their thoughts and everything for each of them, and do a couple rounds over that. You know what? And all that. You know what? I'm gonna have Myron explain it better. That's probably okay. That's probably gonna be better than me trying to explain it because I can't remember all the fucking rules. Only human. So let's bring it on. So, anyways, this is a debate of Myron and Destiny, or Andrew Wilson and Destiny. So let's check it out.
For 5 minutes, where they're gonna, identify their argument, their stance, who they are, introduce themselves to you, etc. That's gonna be 5 minutes uninterrupted. Then we're gonna have 3 minutes where each of them are gonna be able to lodge their arguments for 3 rounds of that, for 3 minutes, going back and forth. And then we're going to have 2 rounds where it's an open 5-minute dialogue. I'll be timing each round, staying as a neutral moderator. So guys, if you're not familiar with Destiny or Andrew Wilson, please go subscribe to both their channels. I'm cool with both these guys. Obviously we don't agree on everything, but I respect both these guys as skilled debaters, and they're good colleagues of mine. So please go check out their channels on YouTube and on Rumble and all the platforms that they're on. Domini Liberal on Twitter, the Paleo Christ. Was it the Paleo Christ Con on X?
Just Paleo Christ Con, yeah.
Yeah, on X. So go check them out on all the platforms, guys. I'm happy to be able to host this debate. So other than that, we're live on all platforms, YouTube, Rumble, etc. Check us out on rumble.com/freshfit. And Andrew, I will turn it to you to go ahead and start with opening statement.
So there you go. So this is a legit debate. They have 5 minutes for their opening arguments, 3 minutes to substantiate their arguments, I guess. Open statements. Substantiate their arguments, and then go on and so forth. So and they have a couple of rounds of that. So I think what we're all used to when we hear debate is just 2 people yapping over each other and arguing. But this is a proper debate format that we're going to have here. So let's listen to Andrew Wilson's opening statement.
And I'll start the timer.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you to the entire Fresh and Fit audience for coming out, and to DGG as well. We're here today to debate if the events of the January 6th Capitol riots were an insurrection or if they weren't. Simple. It's a simple debate prompt. They either were or they weren't. Looking into the idea of insurrection itself, it isn't exactly clear what the meaning of it is. It does always seem to be tied together with violence or some will to overthrow a government, law, government system, government itself, or resistance to that law, or something akin to this. The Supreme Court hasn't given us any guidance on this as they wash their hands of it, and to date, not a single person has been charged or convicted of insurrection who participated in any of the J6 rioting. This includes Donald Trump himself, who was acquitted of inciting insurrection. You would think, with no clear guidance of what an insurrection is, a lack of anybody being prosecuted for this supposed insurrection who participated, and a president acquitted of inciting one, that would be that. The events of January 6th were a protest that turned into a riot. This is nothing new. Democrats do it all the time. In fact, Destiny in 2021 completely agreed with my current assessment. Please, if you don't mind, play clip 1.
Okay, we will make that available to you. Bills is going to roll it up right now. And I will go ahead and give you an extra 5 seconds just on your thing, just because. Okay, go ahead. Play the video, please.
If you think the majority of the people there were actually trying to do that, and all they managed to do was kill one woman got shot by the cops, you're fucking delusional. I think most of the people probably showed up to protest because they were fucking mad, and then shit got riled up. They were probably, almost for sure, I would say, some genuine bad actors there that had fantasies of invading the fucking Capitol and shit. Now, I think I heard from the FBI that it was 5% or less had some plan to do something. Even that number sounds a little bit high, because 5% of however many thousand people, there's a lot of people. But I don't think every single person who went there, their goal was to destroy the White House or destroy the Capitol building and take it over. But because if they were, we would have saw way more shit.
Okay.
Now, just so you know, I have no...
So what we just heard there is Destiny having the stance that a typical average Trump supporter has now. Okay, 2021 Destiny apparently has the same stance that the average Trump supporter has as of now. That, hey, this was just a riot or a protest that got out of hand, turned into a riot. Simple as that. I would say a lot of MAGA and Trump supporters have pretty much been spouting that since day fucking one. What changed, Destiny? Why all of a sudden that you called this an insurrection when the evidence was clear? Even you agreed that it was nothing more than a riot that got out of, or a protest that got out of hand, turned into a riot. Now he'll end up saying a bunch of crap like, oh, well, because of Trump did this, that's that, and third, it's but that doesn't really change what the protesters were doing, the rioters were doing. That doesn't really change what they're doing. All it matters is what Trump was doing. Doesn't really matter what the rioters were doing.
Visual on my end when those play, and I'd appreciate it if you guys could put the visual up on my end as well.
Okay.
In fact, Destiny even agrees such rioting and political political violence is part of the democratic process, akin to voting, he says. He said this to justify the George Floyd or BLM riots, that such riots were just one side of the Democrat coin and baked in to our Democrat process. The tail's in and just the other half of democracy, he says. Of course, he later denied this. Please play clip 2.
Okay. And we'll get this so that you can see it.
See it.
Give us 1 second. I'm going to stop the clock while we're right now, we're 2 minutes and 40 seconds
sack
in.
of shit.
Oh, hold on, Bills. I'm going to start the clock back up once, to be fair here, once the clip is up. Can you see it, Andrew?
I cannot see the clip. No, on my end.
He's going to make it visible to you here in a second.
Great.
And I stopped the clock just so everybody knows.
Now, I wanted to stop here just real quick and comment Myron for how professional he did of a debate he did here. You really did a really good he just did such a great job, I would think, that of moderating this debate. It was kind of and the reason it was so refreshing is I think the last debate
we're using a million different things, OBS, Zoom, all this other stuff. Shout out to Bills in the back, working
Ralph's
hard.
Stream, the kill stream, and Ralph was
Can you
such
see it now?
fucking twat.
I can see something.
Cunt that
There we go.
Okay.
Perfect.
So we will roll the clip now. I'm going to start the clock back up. Bills, go ahead.
It was Myron.
A disingenuous sack of shit. Because, as I've debated you in the past, you started talking before January 6th ever occurred about how the BLM riots were justified. It was just the other side of the coin of voting. Of course, once you realized that grip wouldn't do as well for you when you were debating the Rittenhouse shit, you completely 180'd your position.
Did I ever say writing is the other side of the coin of voting?
Probably did.
That's a really strange statement I did. If I did, that's a really strange statement. But go ahead. Okay.
I'm trying to find the clip.
Activism and riots are one side of the coin and the other side is voting. I don't think there's conspiratorial at all. I think that affecting political change like this is fine. Like that's part of the goal. Like activism and riots are one side of the coin and the other side is voting.
Okay.
Whoa.
And we're 3 minutes and 20 seconds in. Go ahead.
So why the radical change of heart on this topic from Destiny? This complete 180? Well, that's simple. He hates Donald Trump. A simple motivation, but at least understandable. He also hates Trump supporters. In order for him to justify that he wants them all to be unalived, he needs to brand them all as traitors and insurrectionists. In this way, he can build a case that Trump supporters are evil, and so it is justified to use violence against them. To recap that, Trump supporters are evil, therefore anything which happens to them is fine. Going so far as to say his friend Pisco, the only reason he wouldn't have liked Trump to have been unalived by this would-be assassin is because it would motivate Republicans. This, of course, gives us an entailment that if it wouldn't motivate Trump supporters, he would be fine with Trump having met his demise in this assassination attempt. And this is the last clip. Play clip 3, please, and then I'll wrap this up.
Okay, we're 4 minutes and 20 seconds in. I'm going to stop the watch while we pull this up. Approximately 4:24 seconds, but I'm adding another 5 from the first clip and how we were pulling it up. So
far beyond that. So far.
Okay. I'll start the clock back up once we roll the clip. Can you see it, guys? Can you see it, Andrew? Oh, sorry. He's screen sharing it right now. Give us 1 second. We'll pull it up. Thank you, audience, and thank you guys for bearing with us here. Many things going on. We want to make sure that Andrew can see it as well as the audience.
Yep, I can see it.
You can see it? Okay. Bills, go ahead. I'll start the timer back up.
So far beyond that. So far giving a fuck beyond any of these fucking losers. But go ahead. Yes, man.
Can I ask you a question? So, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to.
Yeah.
Do you wish the attempt had been successful?
Do I wish that the attempt had been successful?
Yes,
fuck, am I even allowed to say anything about that?
Like this all, like that moment trying to give himself some space and shit. That's a yes. Yes, he does. Yes, he is.
You don't have to answer that.
Here's what I'll say. Here's what I will say. A failed attempt is probably the worst outcome of anything that could have happened. I'll say that much.
I disagree. I think a successful attempt, if that had happened.
Well, actually, hold on. Might agree. The successful attempt, or
stop real quick.
attempt be an attempt at that point. The successful.
Pause real quick. So, guys, we just hit pretty much the 5 minute mark. Destiny, if you're okay with it, I can let this kind of go on another minute or so, and I'll afford you an extra minute and give you 6. Are you okay with that?
You can. Yeah, you can let me.
You sure? Okay. All right, then. So we'll complete this out. I'll time it. Whatever I gave Andrew, I will give to you as well on your opening statements if you're okay with that. Go ahead, Bills. Roll the clip back. Thank you, Destiny.
Whatever. It might be the worst thing that happened. But if it was the worst thing, it was just because of like the country's reaction afterwards, basically, which is possible. Yeah.
Well, I mean.
So ultimately, Destiny needs to be able to provide us with what an insurrection actually is, an actual working legal definition, or even a personal one, so we can work off of that to understand the mindset of a person who claims this was an insurrection, even as nobody ultimately is prosecuted for an insurrection. He to date hasn't done this for the same reason the Supreme Court had him all the time, nonstop, in fact. I am, in fact, willing to, in the ultimate spirit of good faith, concede that if Destiny just can't really define an insurrection or tell us what goes into that category, and not he has no business calling anybody an insurrectionist, especially when nobody's been charged with an insurrection in regards to J6. Nobody, and certainly not convicted. I will concede, however, if he concedes Democrats are likely involved in insurrections all the time, using violence for political change, I'll concede Republicans may be as well if his definition is that broad. However, that will eliminate his moral high ground for the justification of do what you want to them because they're traitors. That would also make you a traitor. Okay. With that, I'll cede my time. Note in that video that the entire audience, when he was asked this question by Pisco, said, yes, we would have preferred that Trump was unalive during that assassination attempt. Go ahead.
Okay. So that I have approximately 6 minutes, 45 seconds there. Destiny, I will reset.
Now, I want you guys to pay attention somewhere because it gets important later on. In that entire opening statement, well, Andrew did not make any affirmative statements. He never said January 6th was not an insurrection. He never said it was an insurrection. Okay? Just want you to focus on that because it becomes important later on.
Set the clock and allot you the same exact amount of time to stay fair here. Let me know when you are ready, and I'll restart the clock.
Yeah, I'm ready whenever.
You ready? Okay, I'm going to start it now. I'll give you 6:45, and go ahead, brother.
All right. I believe that the subject matter of the debate is whether or not January 6th is an insurrection or would be considered an insurrection. Originally, I thought there was going to be a 1v1 debate against me and Andrew, but I can do a 1v2 debate against my 2021 less educated self as well. I have no problem speaking to arguments I've made in prior clips. I have no problem speaking to current arguments made by Andrew. So we can head down that road. I think that the first we need knowledge when we talk about the structure of the United States government is that the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land. The Constitution is what powers our 3 branches of government, and it sits above every other part of the Constitution. I think this is a foundational American belief and principle, and if you don't share on this foundation, we're never going to connect in any sort of meaningful way when we talk about how U.S. law or U.S. process or procedure, whatever, should be carried out. So that being said, there was an amendment to the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, and Section 3 of that amendment basically goes on to say that any prior oath taker that has engaged in or aided in an insurrection is no longer allowed to hold office, essentially. Now, the question that we come to today is trying to define what is an insurrection. And while in modern times, it seems like an insurrection is a term left to a dictionary or a term left to internet debaters, at the time that the amendment, the 14th Amendment, was framed, what was an insurrection was pretty well understood. An insurrection.
Yeah, but it's interesting. He says it was pretty well understood what an insurrection was at the time of the 14th Amendment being written. I agree. An insurrection was the Civil War, which was why it was specifically written for. Some argue that because it was because of this, the reason that it was specifically tailored to. It was specifically tailored to the Civil War, and it is moot at this point, and doesn't warrant any further examination. It doesn't really apply to anything else. That could be the argument if you would like, but yes, we understood what an insurrection was, and an insurrection is what will lead up to an open rebellion. And I think that's what the founding father or the framers who enacted this amendment had in mind, was someone who was going to be working up to an open rebellion, or someone who participated in open rebellion. And I think that's very important to understand the context in which it was written.
Insurrection includes 4 vital elements. 1 is an assemblage, meaning a group of people that have come together. 2 is resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. 3 is you have to do this by way of force or intimidation. And 4 is it has to be through for a public concern or a public cause, not a private thing that one might be interested in. Just for some understandings of when we say an assemblage, we can look to in 1861, Justice Benjamin Curtis said a combination or conspiracy by which different individuals are united in one common purpose. So not just a bunch of people in a city protesting different things. Justice Samuel Chase, in the case of Fries in the year 1800, he says if a body of people conspire and meditate an insurrection to resist or oppose the execution of any statute of the United States, a statute such as the ECA, the Electoral Count Act, which is what they were united on January 6th to insurrect against. They were opposing the execution of that. They are only guilty of a high misdemeanor, but if they proceed to carry such intention into execution by force, which we did see on the day of January 6th, regardless of if every member engaged in force or just one, they are guilty of the treason of levying war, and the quantum of force employed neither lessens nor increases the crime, whether by 100 or 1,000 persons is wholly immaterial. Doesn't matter if you have an insurrection of 50 people, 100 people, or 1,000 people. You only really need 2 people there to make it an insurrection. In terms of whether or not they were resisting a law or interfering with the cause of government, we can quote here, an insurrection against the United States requires resistance to any statute or some public law of the United States. This is a quote by Judge in, I think, 1826. Curtis spoke this to a jury. He says, the law does not distinguish between a purpose to prevent the execution of one or several or all laws. An insurrection could be directed at a legislature as well as at executive officials. William Rawle declared that an effort to coerce repeal of a general law to be an overt act of levying war. And Justice Field's opinion in the Great House Court case held that any effort to coerce the conduct of government constituted insurrection. And people went to the White House, went to the Capitol to coerce Pence to overthrow the election, which is what Donald Trump told them to do. By force or by intimidation, quoting Justice Marshall in 1807, the most comprehensive definition of levying war against the king or against the United States, which I have seen, requires an assemblage of men ready to act and with an intent to do some treasonable act and armed in warlike manner, or else assembled in such numbers as to supersede the necessity of arms. You don't necessarily need weapons to do it. You could just have the numbers of people there threatening to use force or intimidation. And then for a public purpose, obviously, the insurrection is to, I'm quoting Judge John Kane here, insurrections to redress by force national grievances or perform real or imaginary evils of a public nature. Obviously, they were protesting the vote. That's what they were there to do. This is obviously a public issue. So to recount, for the assembly, there were hundreds of people that breached the Capitol building. There were thousands that trespassed on federal land. For 2, there was a clear resistance to the federal law. The trespassers were there to contravene the Electoral Count Act. There was a plethora of evidence brought up in the Anderson versus Griswold case about this, where quoting the judges on that case, they said substantial evidence in the record showed that the mob's unified purpose was to hinder or prevent Congress from counting the electoral votes as required by the 12th Amendment and from certifying the 2020 presidential election. The third element, the resistance made and from certifying force. This is self-evident just by watching any of the videos. This is self-evident just by watching videos. Again, the mob repeatedly and violently assaulted. Again, the mob repeatedly and people marched very famously with 1776 signs, which in this audience might be familiar with. It's a very popular insurrection in U.S. history. March, as this might be very popular in U.S. history. Or rebellion, one might say. And for public purpose, it was obviously for the public purpose of what they perceived to be as the stealing of the election.
Sorry about that. I'm fucking with all my settings and shit. I'll say fucking. I'll figure it out later.
There are ways
Sorry
to try
about
to
that.
counter this argument. We can either use nonsense definitions of insurrection, but that doesn't really matter. The only thing that matters was the public understanding and the legal understanding of insurrection at the time the 14th Amendment was created and when Section 3 was framed, because that's what the Constitution demands, that we look at what was thought of as an insurrection when the language was added to the Constitution. We can try to divert by talking about BLM or anything else, and I'm happy to dive into all of those examples if we are going to concede on the original argument that January 6th satisfies all 4 elements of what I consider an insurrection to be. If we want to concede that and move on to analyzing any particular BLM action or whatever, that's totally fine. We can talk about the likeliness to work, of which an insurrection has never been defined as. An insurrection doesn't necessarily have to lead to the overthrow of the government.
Warning.
That would be understood as a rebellion. Every insurrection is not a rebellion, though every rebellion starts as an insurrection. And then when we say, this is a common one as well, why was no one charged with an insurrection? People can be charged or couldn't be charged with crimes for a variety of reasons, but for purposes of the 14th Amendment, nothing in there requires the criminal conviction of the crime of insurrection, only that an insurrection occurred and that one engaged in it or aided it.
All right. And that is 6:40. Okay. So just 5 seconds shy. That completes the opening statements. Really good arguments from both sides here. We'll go into round 1. I'll turn it back. So we just completed opening statements, guys. Each party had 6 minutes and 45 seconds to make their original stance and their first opening statements. We'll go to round 1. I'll set the clock for 3 minutes. Andrew, let me know when you are ready. And I will.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, timer is going now. Go ahead, 3 minutes.
Yeah, so let's start with this idea of my definition. What the hell do I care about your definition? Nobody has been prosecuted for any insurrection by any definition. Destiny comes through and he gives us this list. He says 1, an assemblage. Okay. 2, resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Okay. 3, by force or intimidation. Okay. 4, for a public purpose. He has just outlined basically almost every
Sorry about that. Let's see. Hold on. I'm just trying to. I'd like to really.
assemblage. This would cover a riot. A bunch of people assemble. Basically, almost every single political riot I've ever heard of. Assemblage. That is what that is outlined. So let's see an assemblage. This would cover basically almost every single political riot I've ever heard of. Assemblage. That is what that is outlined. So let's see an assemblage. This would cover basically almost every single political riot I've ever heard of. With the course of a government proceeding, that could be shutting down roadways for commerce. That could mean anything. By force or intimidating, if you have Black Lives Matter, other groups like this, shutting down roadways for commerce, that could mean anything. By force or intimidating, if you have Black Lives Matter, other groups like this, shutting down roadways for commerce, that could mean anything. By force or intimidating, if you have Black Lives Matter, other groups like this, shutting down roadways for commerce, that could mean anything. By force or intimidating, if you have Black Lives Matter, other groups like this, shutting down roadways for commerce, that could mean anything.
All right, my bad. All right, for reals this time, I'm gonna stop fucking with this thing, and just leave it be. I apologize. I'm trying. I really wanted to try and get this OBS stuff set up, but I can't fucking do it. I'm not smart. And I'll figure it out later. There we go.
And then for public purpose, very nebulous. That could be shutting down roadways for. So let's see an assemblage. He has just out 3 by force of 2.
Timer is going now. Go ahead, 3 minutes.
Yeah, so let's start with this idea of my definition. What the hell do I care about your definition? Nobody has been prosecuted for any insurrection by any definition. Destiny comes through and he gives us this list. He says 1, an assemblage. Okay. 2, resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Okay. 3, by force or intimidation. Okay. 4, for a public purpose. He has just outlined basically almost every single political riot I've ever heard of. That is what that is outlining. So let's see, an assemblage. This would cover a riot, a bunch of people assembling. Resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. That could be shutting down roadways for commerce. That could mean anything. By force or intimidating, if you have Black Lives Matter, other groups like this who are out there saying no justice, no peace, that would be very intimidating. And then for public purpose, very nebulous. All of this is completely nebulous language. He has not actually given us a definition at all. By the way, if you could cam me while I'm talking, I'd appreciate it. He has not given us a definition at all. He's just kind of given us this loose, nebulous framework for what is or isn't an insurrection. So let's kind of dive into a couple more things here. He says people can or can't be charged for a variety of reasons. That's not saying anything. So what? Yeah, that's true. Maybe they committed insurrection and they weren't charged for insurrection, but also maybe they did not commit insurrection and that's why they weren't charged with insurrection. That's a non-argument.
That's a really good argument on Andrew's part. It's like, yeah, they could be. There's could have been a number of reasons why they weren't charged for insurrection. I would say Occam Raisin, the most simplest one, would be that they didn't commit an insurrection, so therefore they weren't charged. I would say that would be the most simplest reasoning for why they weren't charged with an insurrection. And I think the common person would make that argument as well. Would say, well, look, could there be a variety of reasons why someone did not commit an insurrection? Yes, I totally agree. There could be a number of reasons why someone who committed an insurrection and we're not charged with it. There's also a really good reason that they didn't commit an insurrection, therefore they weren't charged. And I think that's the far more simplest one.
He says that these elements, third element, self-evident, Colorado Supreme Court using 1776 signs. People use 1776 signs all the time and have absolutely no interest in any type of rebellion whatsoever. It's very common for people to have those as bumper stickers. That doesn't mean that they're going to be engaging in any kind of rebellion or insurrection at all. He also, as he talks about these various rulings, he says treason of levying war comes in. Obviously, insurrection seems to have something to do with levying war against the United States, or at least some type of start to levy war against the United States. He still has not actually demonstrated any of this. He's just given us this really nebulous idea. An assemblage, resisting any law or interfering with a course of government proceeding by force or intimidating for public. This is very nebulous. So unless Destiny is going to concede that anything which meets this criteria is an insurrection, then I'm not even sure how to go forward with this debate. How in the world can he say essentially almost any riot on planet Earth or any assemblage, even a peaceful protest where they shut down the roads, is an insurrection? That can't be true. That just can't be true.
Okay. We had ended there at about 2:57. Andrew, you're up on our channel. They can see you. I don't know if it's on your.
Yeah, we're good on mine too.
Okay, you are. Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure that we're there. So, but you are definitely up on, and whoever's speaking, I always make them the main person. So, Destiny, I'm going to put this is round one. I'm going to put 3 minutes on the clock for you. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead, brother.
So I think my definition is pretty clear. There is an assemblage. There's a clear resistance to the implementation or the execution of some federal law. The resistance has an aim to make use of force or intimidation, and it's gathered for a particular public purpose. BLM almost automatically fails on the fact that these were not usually demonstrations against federal law. I don't know the federal law or the...
Now, I don't know if I pointed this out or not, but I don't think I did actually. But notice, if you remember back when Destiny gave that definition, he never mentioned anything about federal law. Now he's honing in on you have to specifically be going against federal law to perform an insurrection, which doesn't make any sense. Just because that it's not federal doesn't mean that just because you're going against a state government doesn't mean it can't. That's not an insurrection. Doesn't make any sense. Why does it have to be federal? I would say an insurrection would be against any form of government. If you are attempting to overthrow any form of government, I would call that an insurrection, whether it's federal or state or anything in between. County. So I don't understand Destiny's point here, but let's let them continue.
Federal thing that was being resisted by BLM. But again, I'm happy to dive into any particular BLM supposed insurrection or riot if you'd like. But again, I mean, that has nothing to do with January 6th. And if you want, then you can see that entire argument and we can move on to analyzing individual BLM instances. But again, you'd have to show that there was some implementation or carrying out of some federal function for it to be an insurrection against the United States government. States might have their own definitions of state insurrections. I'm unaware of any. So to say again, my definition of insurrection, like very clearly as 4 elements. If you want to suggest an alternate definition that you feel more accurately comports with what you would consider an insurrection to be, that's fine. But we can't just say that it's nebulous and there is no definition when we have we've got references made in our Constitution and in our federal criminal code to insurrection. That doesn't make any sense. We can complain about people being charged with an insurrection or not, but whether or not somebody is charged with an insurrection, again, has nothing to do with the event itself. For instance, if I were to look and see at any number of BLM riots, if I were to look at a riot, would a challenge to that riot be, well, was anybody charged with rioting? If I could show you a riot where people clearly engaged in a riot, where there was a mass of people that were engaged in violent behavior that involved the destruction of some property or violent activity, but I were to say, well, look, nobody was actually charged with rioting, would you say then that, well, I guess nobody was actually, or there wasn't a riot that actually happened? Nobody would make that claim. There's a whole list of reasons why a prosecutor may or may not charge for particular crimes. In this particular case, there were really good reasons not to head down that insurrection charge road, because it would probably put the Supreme Court in a very hairy area, which they might end up getting into anyway, in terms of actually having a strict definition of what insurrection is. But again, the 14th Amendment doesn't require a strict definition of insurrection in order to disbar somebody from running from office. All it needs is for a court to engage in asking the question of whether or not somebody had engaged in an insurrection, and if they had and were a prior oath taker, then they were barred from taking.
Okay, but if a court, what would a court have? What would a court need to be able to determine if someone had actually engaged in an insurrection? Well, they would have to have a definition of insurrection, would they not? So this argument doesn't make any sense to me. And you know, look, both Destiny and Andrew Wilson are far smarter than I am. I'm not backing that. I'm not trying to say that at all. They're both far more intelligent, but I don't understand this. Is if you were going to let's go back to his argument. Okay,
somebody had engaged in an insurrection. All it needs is for a court to engage in asking the question of whether or not somebody had engaged in an insurrection, and if they had.
Okay. So again, he says, you know, the 14th Amendment doesn't require someone to be charged with an insurrection. They would have to. A court would just have to determine an individual was, had engaged in one, but a court would also need a definition of one. And, so hold on. I think I was going, I heard something there.
Require a strict definition of what an insurrection is. But again, the 14th Amendment doesn't require a strict definition of insurrection.
It says, the 14th Amendment doesn't require a strict definition, but then he goes on to say a court would have to determine an individual had engaged in an insurrection. Well, then wouldn't that mean that the court would also need a strict definition? You can't just say in a vague sense someone engaged in insurrection, therefore you can no longer run for office. That doesn't make any sense. They would have to have a strict definition that people could follow. You know what was a very good strict definition of insurrection? The Civil War. Okay, people who fought on the other side of the Civil War were instructed and followed up with an open rebellion. That was a very clear definition of an insurrection. I would say an insurrection is a violent attempt to overthrow the government that may or may not lead to open war. But I would think that's the definition I think most people would think of. But I would think when the Congress actually were making this law, the Civil War had just happened, and it was something that was probably was good into their mind. Like, hey, this here's probably an insurrection. Don't you think? Yeah, I don't know.
Insurrection in order to disbar somebody from running from office. All it needs is for a court to engage in asking the question of whether or not somebody had engaged in an insurrection, and if they had and were a prior oath taker, then they were barred from taking any public office in the future. So yeah, again, if there's an alternate definition that wants to be explored for an insurrection, then I welcome that. But that definition, it needs to comport with the historical and legal understanding of what an insurrection was. Otherwise, it's just meaningless, meandering, opining that means nothing when we should be thinking like, what was the definition of insurrection at the time the 14th Amendment was drafted?
Okay, that's 2 minutes and 40 seconds. You don't want to use the rest of the 20 seconds, Destiny? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like we can, if this ends up going into like a whole bunch of like BLM stuff, I mean, we can get to that, but that has no bearing on whether J6 would be considered an insurrection or not. So,
okay. So 2 minutes, 57 seconds. That completes round one. I will restart the clock. We'll move into round two. I'll turn it back to you, Andrew. Let me know when you're ready and I'll turn the clock on.
So I'm not claiming that this has anything to do with BLM. I'm doing an internal critique and saying that if you're going to apply these nebulous standards to this, then you must apply them to this. If this category, if category A over here, also would include everything which includes a riot, then we would need to know what the delineating factor is. He claims here there must be some federal element. However, that's not in his definition. His definition does not include any federal element. To go over his definition again, an assemblage, resisting law.
Andrew is making a good point here about if you're gonna have if you're gonna have a definition, and that definition also applies just as well to a riot, you're gonna have to provide a something that distinguishes the riot from the insurrection, or otherwise all riots are insurrection. That's what he's basically saying here. That's what he's saying. It's like, if the definition you gave applies just as well, if not better, to a riot. So what distinguishes an insurrection from a riot based on your definition? And Destiny tried to add this, like, oh, well, it has to be against federal law. That wasn't part of his original definition, though, and that's the problem.
By force or intimidation for public purpose. It doesn't say anything about a federal element. He just pulled that out of his ass. I don't know where the hell he got that, but it's definitely not in his definition. If it was, he should have said that was in his definition. He keeps going back to this illogical idea that just because X doesn't happen doesn't mean X isn't true. Yeah, that's true, but it also doesn't mean X is true. So making the claim that, well, wait a second, Andrew, just because they weren't actually charged with insurrection doesn't mean they weren't guilty of insurrection. Well, that's nice, but it doesn't mean they were either. And I have the evidence on my side, as none of them were actually prosecuted for insurrection. None of them were prosecuted for insurrection, and Trump was acquitted for inciting insurrection. So the evidence.
So again, what Andrew is pointing out here is just a fact that he's just disproving Destiny's point here, where he keeps saying, well, just because someone wasn't prosecuted for something doesn't mean they didn't do something. That's true. But something, if they weren't prosecuted for something or charged with something, it also could just as likely mean that they didn't do that thing. So for example, if you're standing there over a dead body, all right, and you're not charged with murder, okay, Destiny is saying, well, just because you weren't charged with murder doesn't mean you didn't murder this guy. And Andrew's like, yes, that's true, but it also could mean that because he wasn't charged with murder, he could have not done that thing. So basically, they're at a net neutral. It's like Schrodinger's cat. Okay, you guys don't know what Schrodinger's cat is. It's like there's a time release poison that happens at any point. You put a cat in a box and you leave the cat there, and until you open that box, you don't know whether the cat is alive or dead. If it's similar to this here, they're both at like a neutral point. On one side, Destiny's saying, he's like, well, just because they weren't charged with with an insurrection doesn't mean they didn't commit one. And then Andrew's counter is, you're right, that could be true. But it also that also means that if they weren't charged with an insurrection, doesn't mean they committed an insurrection. So they're just here. That's all this is.
This is on my side. He would actually have to demonstrate that this was an insurrection and that they were all wrong. that they were completely incorrect in not charging it this way. He just keeps saying, well, there's a variety of reasons why they didn't. Well, that's nice. Couldn't one of the reasons be because it wasn't an insurrection? Yes, that seems to be a very obvious reason, doesn't it? Going back to my opening, I just want to kind of point out that Destiny has changed his entire idea on this, whereas at first he claimed in 2021 this was in no way an insurrection, that it fit the criteria of a riot better from anybody who's looking at it objectively. I agree with him. That's exactly what it fits. But he still has not demonstrated at all that this was actually an insurrection. He just says, well, I have this nebulous definition. He also says, give me a counter definition. It's not my burden to give you a counter definition. What do you mean? I'm not calling him insurrectionist. You're calling him insurrectionist. I don't have to define for you what that means. You have to define for me what that means. Giving me these four elements here is meaningless unless you can tell me what goes in those categories specifically that does not go in the category for rioting. Because as I look at an assemblage, resisting any law by force or intimidating or for public, that could all just be rioting. That does not really tell me what goes in the category. You didn't include federal anything. So I would like for you to actually expand on this definition so I can understand what the hell you're talking about and why the J6ers specifically fit this criteria.
All right.
So again, he's pointing out the flaw in Destiny's logic here. He's saying the definition you just laid out for us also could apply to a riot, and it fits just as well for a riot. So what is the distinguishment? Why are these people by your definition, the one you originally gave, why are these definitions why does this mean that they did commit an insurrection and not a riot? Destiny doesn't really have anything for that.
That is 2 minutes and 49 seconds. Destiny, I'll turn it to you whenever you're ready. And we are in round 2 right now, the bottom of round 2.
Yeah, so people so there's 2 parts to the insurrection, 2 elements that I don't think would fit. So the first one is an assemblage. That would clearly fit a riot, I think, but it would fit a riot and it would fit an insurrection. The second part is resisting a particular law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. There are plenty of riots that aren't riots to resist like the implementation of a law or to interfere necessarily with like some government proceeding. We can imagine a million reasons why people might riot outside of a baseball game. People might riot in protest to a statement that was made, or in relation to, I don't know, the outcome of a sporting event. Like there's tons of people that can riot that aren't rioting with the goal of resisting the implementation of a particular law or trying to interfere with the course of some government proceeding. So the part 2, the second element I've listed, really wouldn't comport with most riots. And then the third one is the third element by force or intimidation. I would say that riots generally have a forceful or intimidating aspect to them, although they generally happen spontaneously. Usually they're not planned in advance to use like force or intimidation. To quote Justice Greer, quote, legal authorities can...
Okay, so he says usually riots aren't planned in advance. So then a one that is planned in advance would be, but didn't have, anything else that say that, it like is going to be the only deciding factor is if it was planned in advance. I think someone could riot and not want to do an insurrection. They just want to break shit, and it it could be planned as well. So, I mean, the usually does a little heavy lifting because you could form you could have all these elements and the riot was also planned in advance. Is that an insurrection? I would probably say that Destiny would say no.
Carefully distinguished planned insurrections from spontaneous riots. Justice Robert Greer charged the grand jury in the United States v. Hanway that the defendant who was not leagued with violent resistors to federal law could not be prosecuted for treason. Greer insisted that spontaneous riots were not insurrections, that insurrections required a commitment to use force to resist law, not spur-of-the-moment violence. Most riots just kind of happen. It's pretty rare that they are planned in advance. And I think we all agree that if they are planned in advance, it takes on a much different character and arguably could call under it like different types of crimes. If people, engage in rioting, it's not good. But if people are literally planning it out in advance, we're calling in a whole bunch of different crimes there than just the simple thing of calling a particular thing.
What crimes? What crimes are we going to put in there? I don't know. It's an honest question. I don't know what crimes. So now he's saying that riots is spontaneous thing, but then if you planned it in advance, you could add a bunch of additional crimes. That may be true, but does that mean that it's no longer a riot?
A riot. And then for the fourth thing, when we say for a public purpose, the fourth element, this is the second thing that I don't think most riots would necessarily be in opposition to, that we are insurrecting for some sort of public grievance relating to like the actions of a particular government. So like you might riot, for instance, like BLM might riot against like police violence, but what is that? There's not like a particular federal statute or federal law there. In terms of,
again, he's adding this federal element that was not in the original definition. And there's nothing that there's nothing that was in the original definition that had to do with federal, because you can do a state insurrection. Like I don't get this, but all right.
Me specifying the federal part, well, I mean, J6 was a insurrection against like a federal entity. Again, if we want to talk about like state insurrections or something, I guess we can. But the differentiating factor here, the reason why I have the federal part is because we're talking about federal insurrections, and especially for the 14th Amendment, the federal insurrection part is what we're kind of talking about. I'm not even sure if you can do a state insurrection. Maybe you can.
Well, if you couldn't, then I just have a question. If you couldn't do a state insurrection, then why are there laws against doing a state insurrection? Just wondering. That doesn't make any sense.
But I mean, like summarizing this argument, like the Colorado.
Sorry, what I mean is there's laws against insurrection at a state level, like there's state laws. So again, if by Destiny's definition or whatever you want to call it, you can't, this isn't, you can't, oh man, sorry. You can't, he doesn't know if you can insurrect against a state government, but why wouldn't you be able to? It's a government. Okay. You could, why, well, like what part of that definition, besides him now adding the whole state part, what part of his definition could not apply to a state? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Colorado court found that Donald Trump acted as part of an assemblage, okay, that he helped raising this argument, like the Colorado court found that Donald Trump.
And it's interesting. He's using a state court to try and label Trump as an insurrection. Doesn't make any sense. Now he's talking about, well, now that state is determining someone can be an insurrection. Well, if a state can determine if someone committed an insurrection against the federal government, could they also determine that someone committed, tried to do an insurrection against the state? Wouldn't that make just as much sense? So his denial of and saying it only applies to federal law does not make any sense to me. Also, if I remember correctly, I'm going to Google this real quick. If I remember correctly, didn't Colorado violate Trump's rights? Because if you don't remember, Colorado tried to disqualify Trump from the primary ballot. They attempted to do that. And they deemed by court to have engaged in insurrection. If I remember correctly, let's see. Fucking hell, these! I swear, I remember something about. Yeah, they violated his due process when they were making this ruling, I believe. Let's see. Okay, 2 members of the state Supreme Court believed Donald Trump was not afforded adequate due process, leaving lawyers wonder what more was needed. So the Supreme Court decision was a 4-3 one. From my perspective, so Chief Justice Brian D. Boatwright said, from my perspective, just because a hearing was held and Trump participated, it doesn't mean that due process was observed. And then Justice Carlos A. Zamora Jr. says, the decision to bar former President Donald J. Trump flies in the face of due process doctrine. So, I mean, are you going to really take a ruling that that potentially violated an individual's due process? I don't know, up to you, I guess. But again, I guess my broader point, my point, it really is the fact that Destiny is appealing to a state court who said Trump committed an insurrection, and then ignoring the fact that the federal court, the Supreme Court, the law of the land, said no, he did not. You can't do that.
Trump acted as part of an assemblage, okay, that he helped bring into being. He called the people there. Trump was resisting the enforcement of federal and constitutional rules. He was contravening the 12th Amendment, and he was resisting the Electoral Count Act. Donald Trump, he took numerous illegal actions to prevent the peaceful transition of presidential power. This is like a function of the government. He engaged in an ongoing course of conduct producing violent resistance to the peaceful transfer of presidential power.
And again, then why wasn't he charged? Like, he did all these things. Why wasn't he charged? Like, this is so obvious he did these things, but he was never charged.
This is time. Whether or not somebody's charged, matter. Okay.
That is time. So what I'll do is that concludes round 2. Andrew, I'll turn it back to you unless you want me to give Destiny a little bit extra time, and I can give you that extra time as well on the back end, but I'll let you choose that.
Yeah, I'm fine. He can finish.
Okay. Destiny, go ahead and finish. And I will.
Yeah, sure. The final point was that, but my final statement is, okay, if you look at the Colorado court case, they found that Donald Trump acted as part of an assemblage that he helped bring into being. It said that Trump was resisting the enforcement of federal and constitutional rules, that Trump took numerous illegal actions to prevent the peaceful transition of presidential power. He engaged in an ongoing course of conduct aimed at producing violent resistance to the peaceful transfer of presidential power. He attempted to incite his supporters to attack Congress, which they did, and that Trump's speech occurred sufficiently close in time and place to when and where the insurrection took place to be considered an incitement. Like, every single part of this, like, very easily and very cleanly meets the definition of insurrection. If we want to argue that my definition isn't clean or that my 4 elements aren't being met, that's well, I don't know how we can argue that. I think all 4 elements are being met. If we want to argue that, well, every single riot would, fall into this, then we could say, well, fine, Destiny, I agree. For your definition of insurrection, fine, January 6th was an insurrection. Now let's talk about these other events. We could talk about whether they fit or don't fit. Or you can give me your own definition of insurrection, and then we can go from there.
Okay, that added an extra 55 seconds. So we'll go into round 3. Andrew, I will give you that. So you will have 3 minutes and 55 seconds to take your time. So I'll start at the clock now.
Yeah. So again, trying to put the burden on me to give you a definition of your claim is insane. As we went through your...
Now, you guys don't understand this, and a lot of people don't understand this. Andrew hasn't made a claim here. He has not made a claim. If you remember his opening statement, it did not make a claim. He never said January 6th was an insurrection. He did not say whether it was or was not. Destiny is the one saying that January 6th was an insurrection. So therefore, he has made a positive claim, and therefore he has to, he has the burden of proof. He's required to provide a definition. Andrew doesn't need to provide a definition. He's just arguing with it. And it's hilarious. And I'll show a clip later on. But it's just funny that that Destiny keeps trying to shift the burden to Andrew. Andrew doesn't need to say a definition because he hasn't made a claim. He hasn't made a positive or negative claim. He is neutral. You don't understand that. Not much I can do.
Definition here. It's really funny because I'm going to use your own logic back to you. Just because they weren't charged with an insurrection doesn't mean it wasn't an insurrection. Oh, okay. Well, they were actually charged with elements of rioting. So I'm going to say it was actually rioting. And I'm also going to say that, wait a second, your definition here seems to be more about rioting than anything else by your own claim. An assemblage would fit a riot, says Destiny. That's his first claim. Resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. It wouldn't fit rioting itself, says Destiny, even though rioting itself is against the law. What do you mean? Of course it's impeding the law. Well, how could it not be impeding the law? Rioting itself is against the law. I don't know where the hell you came up with that. By force or intimidation, Destiny concedes riots require force for a public purpose. He concedes that's a riot. So really, under his definition, this is just a riot. The only thing that we're arguing about here is number 2, resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Let's try this again. Resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. A riot itself is resisting the law because it's illegal to riot. So I don't understand how that, again, would not just be a riot. All of these things seem to fall into the category of what people were charged with, which is much more along and akin to rioting than it is any type of insurrection. He still hasn't told us the distinction that fits in this category, why this isn't a riot, even though everybody was charged under that kind of branch of rioting.
Now, the definition, at least the dictionary definition, okay, you can take it as one, is withstanding the actions or effect of, try to prevent by action or argument, struggle or fight back when pressured or attack, refrain from doing or having something tempted or unwise, are the various definitions of resist or resisting. Okay, so I would say struggling or fighting back when pressured or attacked. Okay, you could resist the law. I guess that would follow under a law. Trying to prevent by action or argument. Again, that could also fall when it comes to resisting against the law, I would say.
And not charged for insurrection. This is a garbage definition. It's totally nebulous, right? And he keeps on saying, well, wait a second, Andrew, why don't you go ahead and concede that unless you can go against all 4 of these points, why don't I actually have to do that? All I need to do is say, okay, all these 4 points fit a different criteria better than insurrection. And apparently he agrees. He agrees on point 1, point 3, and point 4. The only thing he argues is point 2, but his argument for point 2 makes no sense because rioting itself is illegal. So therefore, you are resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Well, the government proceeding is to enforce law. You would be interfering with the government enforcing law if you're rioting. So all of these fall under the better criteria of riot, which is it's totally consistent in my mind because that was the criteria in which people were charged, not with insurrection. And I really need Destiny to answer to that.
Okay. That was 2 minutes and 40 seconds. You still have a minute left, Andrew. You're going to concede that round then?
Yeah, I'll let him go ahead and answer to it.
Cool. So I will turn it back to you, Destiny. We're in round 3. And this is the second part of round 3. So your turn, Destiny. I'll start the clock back up for you.
Breaking a law and resisting law are not the same thing. Usually when people riot, they're not rioting with the purpose of making arson or murder or whatever other crimes are being broken to make those legal things. Usually they're breaking laws, not with the intent of like resisting the implementation or the execution.
So then resisting arrest isn't breaking the law? Like, what is this? Let's listen back.
Those laws, breaking laws or whatever other crimes are being broken to make those legal things. Usually they're breaking law.
So someone who's resisting arrest is trying to make arrests not legal?
Not with the intent of arson, same thing. Usually when people riot, they're not rioting with the purpose of making arson or murder or whatever other crimes are being broken to make those legal things. Usually they're breaking law.
Again, he has just changed the definition of a word. He's saying resisting, when it comes to this, resisting means that you are trying to advocate or you're trying to change something and make it legal. That's resisting? Again, I mean, they never ended up defining resisting. So I'm just going to have to go back with the anything. But, to try and prevent by action or argument. That's resisting. You could do that and still break the law, I would say. To withstand the actions or effect of, that's something you could do and break the law. Struggle or fight back. That's, again, when pressured or attacked, you break the law. Okay? When you're resisting arrest, you're being pressured or attacked, you're breaking the law. Trying to prevent by action or argument. I mean, I would say then that those BLM, BLM was, they burned down a whole city. They were resisting, the, police brutality. It's an action or argument. I mean, maybe these aren't good arguments. They're probably not good arguments, but his weird skewing of this definition is just very confusing to me. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, why does resisting have to mean that you're trying to make another thing, something else legal? So if you're resisting against something, you're trying to make that thing legal, and that's what makes it resisting and not breaking the law. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, wouldn't you say, like, if you're trying to make arson legal and you just started, rioting and burning shit down, you still be breaking the law regardless. That doesn't make any sense.
Laws, not with the intent of like resisting the implementation or the execution of those laws, or resisting or contravening the execution of like some function of government. When people were rioting on January 6th, the goal of that was to stop the execution of the Electoral Count Act. It was to stop the purpose of the government, the execution, the function of government.
What evidence do you have of that? What evidence do you have that the people that were actually rioting were trying to get it changed? Why? Like, again, a riot's a spontaneous thing. It's not planned. What evidence do you have that it was planned? Okay. I think, there's a, group of people who said, hey, we're planning to do this. But back to 2021, you said, there were, maybe 5% that were actually planning on something. That's not enough. That's what he said back in 2021. This doesn't make any sense again. Just because. Let me listen back to what he said.
Of the Electoral Count Act. It was to stop the purpose of the government, the execution, the function.
Like, what proof do you have of that? How do you know that was the purpose? Because if that was the purpose, why didn't they just start out with a riot? Why were they protesting initially? Okay, that's what it was. Initially, it was a protest. That's what it was. It turned into a riot later on. So if they were trying to stop the vote from happening, why did they wait so long? Why did they do it when, why did they stand out and protest for a time? That doesn't make any sense.
Function of government to do the peaceful transfer of power. They weren't simply engaged in violence and breaking the law. They were resisting the carrying out of the law, the Electoral Count Act, the ECA.
Proof of this?
And again, I don't know, we can loop on this over and over again, but again, if I can show you in Kenosha, if I can show you in Seattle, if I can show you a riot, if I can give you a video of cities burning, people screaming and throwing shit, of, property being destroyed or damaged, and then you were to go, wow, that kind of looks like a riot to me, I would go, yeah, it kind of does. However, nobody was actually charged with the crime of rioting. So do you change your mind on that? Probably wouldn't affect your opinion at all. Again, whether or not you levy a particular charge at a person is way different than whether or not a particular event was a thing. Remember, when you levy a charge at somebody, a criminal charge, what you're really saying is that you can take a person, an individual, and prove beyond a reasonable doubt that no reasonable mind would agree that something else could have happened in front of a jury. That's what criminal court is for. Proving that somebody engaged in a crime beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal court is not the standard that we use to declare a particular thing a thing. You don't have to.
I mean, yeah, but I would say that if they were to charge these people with a riot, they'd be able to make that standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. They have yet to. I don't think, and a lot of people agree that if you try to charge people with January 6th as an insurrection, they wouldn't be able to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt. If you have video of them rioting and charge them with rioting, then I think everyone would agree. They could say, oh yeah, that's a riot. And Andrew's point again is, yes, but these people were charged with rioting. That's where they charged with. They could have had the opportunity to charge them with an insurrection. and they didn't. And what's more important about this particular point is for the past couple weeks, Destiny has been advocating that individuals who support Donald Trump, all right, that due to them supporting Donald Trump and Destiny's belief that he was an insurrectionist, that therefore they are insurrectionists. And if they die, it's a fuck around and find out type of situation. It's a justifiable murder. Okay. So he's not using a standard of beyond a reasonable doubt to label these people insurrectionists, but he believes that it would be a justifiable murder if someone died due to them just solely supporting Donald Trump at a rally. So he wants people that had nothing to do with January 6th, by the way, but because they support Donald Trump, they like him. Maybe they don't believe that he was an insurrectionist, but because Destiny believes he's an insurrection, even though he has not been convicted of any charge or charged with anything, and he's not been convicted in court of beyond a reasonable doubt, just because Destiny says so, the man's an insurrectionist, and therefore, if he dies, it's a justifiable murder. And again, if you go to court and say, well, this murder was justified or justifiable, this was a justifiable murder, the court's going to have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt it wasn't. Okay. You're going to have to, put on some sort of defense that proves that this is justifiable in some sense. So it's just very odd that Destiny's advocating for the death of people. He really wanted Trump to be, for that assassination attempt to have happened, because Destiny believes an insurrectionist. He's an insurrectionist just because Destiny believes. But there's no standard for that at all. It's just because Destiny believes it. Okay. There's no been beyond a reasonable doubt that this man was an insurrectionist. It's just because Destiny thinks he is, therefore die. And that's why this is important here.
To prove in criminal court beyond a reasonable doubt that a thing.
Again, he's like, you don't have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt a thing happened. Okay, yes, you're right. You don't have,
was an insurrection or that a thing was a riot unless we were charging somebody with an actual crime.
Yeah, but then again, he's like, you don't have to prove, something was something. Just what do you fucking say?
So they're a particular thing, a thing. You don't have to prove in criminal court beyond a reasonable doubt that a thing was an insurrection or that a thing was a riot unless we were charging somebody with an actual crime.
Yeah, so he's like, yeah, you don't have to prove, you don't have to do that to say something was something. You don't have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt something was something unless you're trying to charge someone. Okay, I agree. You don't have to label that. But when you're advocating for the death of individuals, okay, and I would say Destiny is doing that, okay, but when you're saying it's a justifiable murder, wouldn't you want it to be a beyond a reasonable doubt standard that someone deserved to die, that someone's life was taken out just because you don't agree with their politics? I mean, isn't that what a sane person would do?
Okay, there's that's 1:50 on the clock. So that concludes round 3, and I'm going to turn it to you, gentlemen. You guys can let me know what you want. We can either do another round of 3 minutes uninterrupted debating, if you guys want to formulate your arguments a bit more, because I know there is some disagreement.
I would like to do one more round.
You would like to do one more? Destiny, are you okay with that?
Sure.
Okay, and then after that, so we'll go into a 4th round with the 3-minute debate time limit where no interruptions. Then after that, we can get into the 5 minutes of discourse between you two where you can actually speak. But is that fair for everybody?
Sure.
Cool.
Sure.
All right, so I will go ahead and reset the clock. This will be round 4. Take it away, Andrew.
Yeah, so this is an absurd argument. We'll go right back to Destiny's logic again. He says just because somebody wasn't charged with X doesn't mean X didn't happen. This is the same. This is complete and total obfuscation, by the way, because ultimately what's going on here is that these do fit the criteria much better for a riot. And under the purview of rioting, these are the types of charges which were levied at these people. Destiny says specifically under point 2, he said, and he didn't answer to this. He said, resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding wouldn't fit rioting. Yes, it does fit rioting. It fits rioting better than anything else I can think of. Yes, you are immediately, upon rioting, resisting the law. and you are obstructing the law immediately. That is what a riot is. It's an unlawful assembly. So how he could say this, in fact, each point he concedes on point one, an assemblage that would fit a riot. An assemblage would fit a riot. That's point one. He agrees. Okay. Point three, by force or intimidation, he agrees on point three that is a riot. He agrees on point four. He conceded on that as well. And then he just conceded on point two. He couldn't exactly tell us why resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding wouldn't fit a riot. Of course it fits a riot. All of these, in fact, fit the events of January 6th perfectly. Perfectly. And if he's conceding that, hey, these fit a riot perfectly, the events of January 6th were a riot, under this definition, which he essentially has conceded is true, then the charges were appropriate that this was a riot and not an insurrection. This could not have been an insurrection. His own definition proves that this is more akin to a riot. He still hasn't really told us, by the way, what an insurrection is, just these kind of four nebulous points. But these four nebulous points fit a riot perfectly.
Again, Andrew's just saying, all Andrew's saying here is that the definition you laid out fits this criteria far better than it does this. And you have yet to provide a distinguishing factor. Okay. They're arguing over, point two, whether that is, whether that fits a riot or not. Andrew's got a point there. It's like, yeah, you could resist it. Like you could do all that. Like point two, you could resist it all. Resist the fall, resist whatever. Or a lawful proceeding or some shit like that. Like, yeah, that could be a riot too. What are you talking about? If people did all these things, the assembly, all that crap, and say, I don't know, they went to like the Chauvin trial and they were trying to disrupt that trial so they could, because they wanted to intimidate the jury into voting the way they want and all that stuff. And then, got it out of hand and they ended up, getting into a battle, punching, beating people up and shit. Wouldn't that'd be a riot too? Would Destiny call that an insurrection? Would that be an insurrection? They were disrupting an official proceedings, a government official proceedings. An official, court case is an official proceeding. So, I mean, what is he talking about? Or when people go out and protest ice facilities, if they end up being violent, would that also be an insurrection? It doesn't make any sense.
Perfectly. And he's basically conceded to three of them on the outset, and then on the second, he's basically conceded that as well, because resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding would fit a riot by its very nature. The reason it would fit a riot by its very nature is because it's immediately an unlawful assembly. You're resisting the law. You're resisting the police. You're resisting. So whether that's done at a federal level or a state level, I think it would still meet the same fate of being more akin to a riot. This definition really moves towards a riot and not towards an insurrection. He has not told us the distinction yet. And so, again, I think that the entire reason he wants this only painted as an insurrection, even though nobody's ever been charged with an insurrection, even though Trump was cleared of inciting an insurrection, is so that he can make justifications for why the other side deserves what it gets, because they're a bunch of traitors. Thus far, no, I'm sorry. This definition or this logic adds up. The logic of saying, well, just because they weren't charged with a thing doesn't mean it wasn't the thing. Fine, but that doesn't mean it was the thing either. And by your criteria, it seems like it was this other thing.
Okay, that's 3 minutes and 10 seconds. I will make the clock the same for you, Destiny, to keep it fair. I will start the timer if you're ready now.
Myron.
I guess we're just going to loop on these points. Resisting a law is not the same thing as breaking a law. If you could show me that there was a particular riot where people assembled and the goal of that riot was when they were rioting, they wanted to riot to make rioting legal, and that they...
Again, that doesn't make any sense. What part of resisting means that you're trying to make something legal? Again, I've gone through the definition of resisting. I guess I'll look at it again. Okay, it has nothing to do, like... struggle or fight back when pressured or attacked, to prevent by action or argument. Like, again, that doesn't make any sense that this requires I guess I'll check out Merriam-Webster. To exert force in opposition is another how resisting can be held. To withstand the force or effect of, to exert oneself so to counteract or defeat. I don't understand, like, and the only thing I have, and I've even looked up legal meanings for resisting. So resisting, legal meaning. So and all I get when I type in Google resisting, legal meaning. Let me change that definition. Okay, resisting. This is a legal definition for resisting. And it just leads back to arrest. So the act of using force to avoid being restrained, fleeing from a police officer to avoid arrest, and threatening a police officer with bodily harm. Okay. So the only legal definition I have to resisting falls under resisting arrest. And I don't understand where Destiny gets this. Well, in this, resisting requires that you need to be trying to make the illegal thing legal. That doesn't make any sense. So I mean, the people that protest the Kavanaugh House for the Dobbs decision, were they insurrectionists because they were resisting the Dobbs decision, which held up the banning or ended up eliminating the abortion ban. So now it was back to the states, but it just doesn't make any sense.
Had gathered, in order to change the law in a particular area, and they were going to use force and intimidation to do it. We're
Okay, so use force and intimidation to do it. Well, were the people that were protesting Kavanaugh's house for the Dobbs decision, was that insurrection? Okay, a group of people went in and they were protesting Kavanaugh's house. They even made threats and even attempted to assassinate him at one point. I would think that all falls under the criteria. They were unlawfully assembled. I would think that falls under all the criteria that Destiny has outlined. Was that an insurrection? So let's listen to this again.
Gathered, in order to, they wanted to riot, to make rioting legal, and that they had gathered, in order to change the law in a particular area, and they were going to use.
So they were trying to change the law in a particular area. Dobbs' decision eliminated Roe v. Wade. They wanted Roe v. Wade to stay, so they were going to try to change the law that was just put down as no longer there's no you could not you could no longer not ban abortion. Basically, it made banning abortion a possibility. They were trying to change that law and make it so you could not ban abortion at all when they were protesting the Dobbs decision.
Use force and intimidation to do it. We're here to riot today because we're going to make rioting legal. Then sure, then we could argue that that's probably an insurrection.
So now, I guess the Dobbs decision, according to Destiny, is the protest and the attempt to intimidate and assassinate. The attempted assassination of Kavanaugh was an insurrection, according to Destiny.
But I mean, these are the four elements that were historically understood at the time. Nobody had any issues at the time charging people with crimes of insurrection. No.
The last time anyone was really charged with crimes of insurrection, if I remember correctly, was when they put down the 14th Amendment, and the clear definition of insurrection then was the violent attempt to overthrow a government, and that turned into the Civil War. I don't remember. Since the 14th Amendment, that was the clearest definition of an insurrection, was trying to overthrow the government, which led to a violent war and open rebellion. Again, that's the context of the 14th Amendment, and I think that matters.
Nobody had any confusion at the time historically.
Again, no one had the confusion at the time historically because we had just gotten over a civil war where we had an open rebellion.
There were Shay's rebellions, the Whiskey Insurrection, the Burr Insurrection, John Brown's raids.
Okay, let me look that up. The Whiskey Insurrection. Okay, the Whiskey Rebellion, also known as the Whiskey Insurrection, was a violent tax protest. That was 1791. So that was prior to the 14th Amendment. You said John Brown raid. So the John Brown raid was part of the prelude to the American Civil War. It's too much to read right now. So, but again, that was Silent Graves 16 says, "What's good, man? I got to be honest. I don't think either choices are all that great for us. I have no clue who I want to vote for in the coming election." Well, I agree. I could understand that. There's no good. They're no great choices. But you got to remember that we have a unique time in our history. Okay, we had 4 years of Trump, and we had 4 years of Biden. Okay. I don't know about you, but I remember life it was a lot better, okay, when Trump was in office. There wasn't inflation, okay? There wasn't gas was really low. Even in the height of COVID, gas was like, where I live, it was it was like $2. $2 a gallon for gas. Okay, at the height of COVID. Groceries weren't as expensive. So I think if you put it in that, like there was no inflation, shit like that nature. So I think you got to think back is like, what was life like 4 years ago? Like, 8 years ago. And then what's life has been the past 4 years. I mean, it's up to you. I'm voting Trump 2024, 100%. Kamala Harris is just as bad. No one likes her. Like I see a bunch of polls and shit on X and everything. I don't believe a single one of them at all. I don't believe a single one of them at all. Because it's like back when Kamala tried to run back in 2020, she ended up getting decimated in a couple debates instantly. So, and it's hilarious that people keep trying to label her the law and order and Trump the convict when she held people over their sentences to fight wildfires. That's terrible. So, I mean, if you don't think either choices are great, I can understand that 100%. I don't agree with Trump on everything, but I think he's a better option than Harris. I don't think she's not that great of an option either. But you vote who you vote for, man.
You had convictions of, like a Pennsylvania farmer, I think, set fire to a house of a tax collector in 1794. He was charged with insurrection. John Freeze and friends made a show of arms that resulted in the release of persons charged with federal tax evasion. That was considered an insurrection in 1847.
Let's see, hold on.
When Hispanic and Native Americans attacked occupying American officials in New York. That was considered an insurrection. In 1847, when Hispanic and Native Americans attacked occupying American officials in New Mexico, that was considered an insurrection.
What's interesting is a lot of I don't know about all of them, but I think a majority, if not all, of Destiny's point here for what was an insurrection, what was the historical context of an insurrection, happened prior to the Civil War. Now, what happened after the Civil War? Well, that's when they made the 18th Amendment or the 14th Amendment. Sorry, the Insurrection Amendment. That's when they did that one. And that's when the whole insurrection thing and not holding office came to be. And at that time, I would say we had the clearest example of what insurrection is. How do I know that? Because what followed after that, the Civil War, was the amendment that prevented people from attaining public office if they were part in an insurrection. So that's logically. All right. Silent Grave says, so Trump was way better at comedy wise, no doubt. That groceries for my family were cheap. I spent $250 some, and now it's $450. I'm all for a woman president, but not her. What about I think you mean RFK Jr., sir, or whatever his name is. Honestly, I don't know any of his standings or what he wants to do. I've been more focused on what Trump has said. I think this week he's coming to MN. Is that Minnesota? Is MN Minnesota? I can't remember. Oh yeah, it is, because you added on I live in St. Cloud, and I may go see him so I can get more insight what he wants to do. Yeah, I think that's a great thing to do, is go and check him out. I'll admit too, I haven't really focused on any of RFK politicians. I respect if you watch Myron from Fresh and Fit, he likes RFK. There's he has some slight disagreements and stuff like that. I haven't looked into RFK that much personally. My problem with RFK is the fact that he has, what does he have? He has this sort of disease, not a disease, but he has like the paralyzing of his vocal cords. Let's see. He has spasmodic dysphonia. Dysphonia. Yeah. So that gets him that voice where it kind of sounds like he's on the verge of crying. At least it does to my ear, and I think that's what's really hampering him here. Unfortunately, is he has that right there, and whenever he talks, he sounds like he's on the verge of crying. And unfortunately, when you have a world leader, you can't have a voice like that. You can't I don't know about that. Silent Graves 16 says, I heard it. He had some bug ate a chunk of his brain too. I'm not sure if that's true. I don't know if that's true either. Again, I haven't really focused on that. But the problem here is his voice. Like I say, he sounds like he's on the verge of crying. Obviously he's not, but that's what it sounds like to me. I have someone at work that has the same thing. And unfortunately, a lot of people, majority of people, are going to find that weak. And you can't have any form of weakness. That's why, if you see my beautiful little image right here, I made myself, because I'm a big boy, of Trump, after he got shot, stand up, raise his fist, a projection of strength. That's why that was a powerful thing for him to do. Just picture Biden, missing a bullet. And do you think he'd be able to get up and project that kind of same strength? No. And unfortunately, when you have a world leader, you need to have someone that projects some level of strength. And Biden definitely doesn't have that. I don't think Harris has that at all. So and RFK unfortunately doesn't have that at all. I think it would be, I don't think there'd be anything terrible if Trump added him into his administration at all. I think that'd be a good move. But I as well as you, I haven't really looked at RFK's standings or what he wants to do or anything. So I get what you're saying. And hey, if you want to go to a Trump rally, great. You should totally do that. Just so you know, Destiny thinks that if there's another assassination attempt and you get hit, well then you deserve it because you're supporting an insurrectionist just by virtue of being there. But I don't think there's anything wrong with going in and listening. If you're still unsure, you don't know what you want to vote, then it is what it is. There's nothing anyone can do. But I think you make a great point there. Was Trump was way better for the economy wise, no doubt about it. I completely agree with you. And here's the thing about majority of Americans and why that's important is most Americans don't really think about the worldwide problems or issues we really have. What do they focus on? They're focused on the economy. Okay, more money in their pockets. Are you going to send any of my sons to war? Things of that nature. And Trump does a lot of better than that. Does that a lot better than Biden or even a Harris administration, as far as we see.
In 1851, when Pennsylvanians obstructed official efforts to capture an alleged fugitive slave,
providing for my family. Yeah, exactly. That's my focus too. I care about providing for my family. Like I said, that falls under economy wise, and all that. So,
was an insurrection in 1856, when there were rival forces in the United States that were violently resisting the laws on slavery. That was considered insurrection. These aren't just like riots where people are like, we're mad and we're breaking the law by being violent. It was they were resisting the law. They were resisting an actual like federal law claiming that that particular law shouldn't exist. They were trying to err.
Again, this thing keeps adding this federal part. Never was in his original definition. And it also doesn't make any sense.
Public grievance through force or intimidation with an assembled group of people in the goal of like overturning that particular thing through violent action. And then on this final thing, so there is a difference between resisting law and breaking a law. Just because you're engaged in a riot doesn't mean that you're resisting the implementation of law. People that are engaged in riots aren't usually rioting to make riots legal. That's what would make that the equivalent.
That doesn't make any sense. Okay. I don't think the difference between breaking and resisting would be that you're trying to make a thing legal. I think you are resisting an implementation of a law. Yeah. So if a law was going to go into effect that all drugs are legal now, and you resist that and protest violently against that law prior to its implementation, are you an insurrectionist? I guess according to Destiny you are. Silent Craves 16 says, I've watched this guy's videos before. I'm assuming you're talking about Destiny here. He speaks some facts, but with sprinkles of twists, if you know what I mean. Yeah. The thing with Destiny is he speaks real fast, and then he overtalks a lot of people. So he makes a lot, like, it sounds like he's making some points, but he's really not.
And then just the crime of X is not the same thing as the event of X. I don't know what you said. Nobody was charged with insurrection, therefore there was no insurrection. If I walk into a room and I see a person's throat cut, can I not say that there was a murder here if nobody was charged with murder? If I see 20 people setting fire to a house and they all run away and nobody gets charged with arson, can I not say that an arson happened? If I look,
well, here's the thing with that point he just said with someone's throat slit. If you walked into someone's throat slit and no one was charged with murder, can you not say it was a murder? Well, how do you know it was a murder then? How do you know it wasn't self-defense? Maybe this guy attacked the other guy and he had to slit his throat to, stay alive. If the guy did it in self-defense, that's not a murder, is it? It's not. Murder is unjustifiable killing. So that doesn't really play out as well as you think, Destiny.
Look on video and I see that there's 500 people blowing up, some shit, and they manage to run away, or the cops, can't arrest any of these people or charge them with like the formal, crime of rioting. Does that mean there was no riot that took place? The crime of X is different than the event of X. And right now we're talking about if January 6th was an insurrection, not did any individual person engage in the criminal behavior of insurrection. That would be a separate.
Destiny would have a point here if no one was charged with anything. Here's the thing, like the thing with the whole rioting stuff. You can look at a riot, see a riot. No one was charged with a riot. So therefore, we could say it wasn't a riot. But normally, like with BLM and stuff, I don't think anyone really gets charged with anything. I don't remember anyone getting charged with anything except like the Rittenhouse thing. But he wasn't charged with rioting because he wasn't rioting. But the difference here in Destiny's example is when a riot happens and no one gets charged with a riot, generally, they don't get charged with fuck all, okay? But here, with the January 6th insurrection, as Andrew has pointed out several times, is that you're right. You could look at a riot, no one gets charged with anything. You could still say it was a riot due to the fact that, of this, but no one's charged with anything. But with January 6th, we have people charged with rioting or elements of rioting. So we have these people, okay? They were charged. These people were charged, and they have been prosecuted, they've gone to trial and been prosecuted for their charges. And those charges are elements of rioting, not insurrection. So that's the difference. Destiny could potentially have a point here if no one was charged with anything. He could have a point. If no one was charged with anything, and he calls it an insurrection, we call it a riot. Well, we're at a neutral here, okay? Well, you call them one thing, we call it another thing. But what we have here is Destiny calls it an insurrection, but no one's been charged with insurrection. Andrew says, hey, this is more like a riot, and we have people charged with a riot. So instead of a neutral position we have where, they're just clashing with each other, we got one-upper. We got someone who's one-upping them. We're saying, yeah, this looks like a riot, and people were charged with a riot. Well, we have Destiny who says this looks like an insurrection. No one was charged with insurrection. That's the big difference here.
Conversation. If we want to have that conversation, we could, but we would have to first concede that an insurrection did indeed take place on January 6th. And I believe that the Colorado Supreme Court engaged in good analysis, and they decided that an insurrection had taken place because it comports with all four elements that I gave to an insurrection that were commonly understood in the historical and legal record around the time that the 14th Amendment was passed, when they were putting insurrection in the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to prevent prior oath takers from holding office again who would engage in insurrection.
And again, so he brings it back to a state Supreme Court found that Donald Trump did an insurrection. The Supreme Court said, no, he didn't. So we have a state court saying X, but a federal court saying no. Like, what is this? All right, so you are going to get me off topic, but I'm okay with that. I'll get a little distracted. All right, so the question is, can I ask? I know it's a little off topic. That's fine. I kind of did bring it up, so it's kind of on topic, but not really. What are your thoughts on the Rittenhouse case? Was he in the right or wrong? In your opinion, can ignore it if you like? Well, I will not ignore this question. I'm very passionate about the Rittenhouse case. All right. So there's two things to this. One, he was in the wrong for being there. Now, what do I mean by that is he shouldn't have been there. All right. He was a 17-year-old kid. Shouldn't have been there. He should have been at home whacking off to fucking porn or playing video games with some other thing. So he was wrong for being there. Okay, but just because he was there doesn't mean he broke any laws. So there's nothing wrong, like wrong as in like not like a legal wrong, but wrong as in it was a dumb idea to be there. Okay, he was wrong in that sense. Now, in the sense of what he was legally charged with, he was 100% in the right. I think anyone that actually watched the case, and I watched the case, I saw the whole trial. I looked at all the evidence with the trial, everything that was presented in the trial. It was the clearest case of self-defense that I think anyone could have seen. It was an absolute clear case of self-defense. Let's take it back. All right, we have Joseph Rosenbaum, who said prior to chasing Rittenhouse down or anything, if I get you alone, I will effing kill you. Okay, if I get any of you alone, I will effing kill you. Kyle's there. You witnessed that. He heard that. Okay. Then he runs down and goes and puts out a fire. He has Rosenbaum chasing him down. He says, F you, F you, F you, throws the plastic bag. A gunshot goes off, turns around. Okay. Doesn't fire. That's very important. He turns around and does not fire, even though he's had a shot been fired towards him or in the air. I think it was. I can't remember. And he's had a plastic bag thrown at him. All right. So he turns around, doesn't fire. He does not fire until what? Rosenbaum goes and tries to grab the Rittenhouse's firearm. Okay, so Rittenhouse only fires when he has perceived an actual threat. If Rosenbaum takes this gun from Rittenhouse, as far as we know in Rittenhouse's mind, this guy's going to kill me because he says, and I'm alone here, I don't got any of my buddies. If I catch you alone, I will kill you. So right there, he fires, I can't remember how many shots it was, but he fires a shot or two. And this was proven by the medical examiner that Rosenbaum had his hand on the barrel, or at least close enough to the barrel that the only reason his hand would be there would be to grab the barrel, okay, because of the powder that was on his hand or anything. And so it was proven that he was actually reaching towards to grab the barrel. So right there, Rittenhouse shoots him. That's an immediate, justifiable self-defense. Okay, Rosenbaum goes down. Now Kyle, he's surrounded. He's got a lot of angry people. He just shot someone on their side. What does he do? He runs away. Now, could that have been wrong? No, it's not wrong. Because if you're in a self-defense shooting and you end up and you shoot someone and you don't feel safe that you could like stay here, if you stay here, if you stay here, I'll get to that. I'll get to your statement in a second here. If you stay here, you could die. You can leave the scene. You can leave the scene of killing. And what you're supposed to do is once you are safe. So let's say you run away from a situation and you get like, I don't know, 2-3 miles away. Okay. You should call the police and let them know, hey, X happened. I'm here. You can come get me. Okay, that's what you're supposed to do. Now, what does Kyle do? He runs away towards cops. Okay, so he just shoots someone. He runs away towards cops. Now he runs into Gage Grosskreutz, and he said, and Gage goes, "What Hey, what's going on?" And what Gage hears is what he hears is something police. I think Gage says, I think he said, "I'm with the police," and what Kyle says is, "I'm going to the police." So either way, Gage knows that Rittenhouse is going at least towards the police or is with the police in some aspect. Okay, so for all Gage knows, police revolves around Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse is running towards the cops. Very clear. Okay, he has not fired a single shot while he was running away. He has not pointed his gun at anyone at all. Then he gets knocked down. He gets attacked. I can't remember if he he just gets like punched in the head. I can't remember. And so he falls to the ground. Then he gets kicked in the face. Getting kicked in the head, that's a deadly force attack because the head's very fragile. You could get knocked out. You get your weapon staying around. You could just get killed that way. It's a deadly force threat. So he fires another shot at Jump Kick Man. Okay, that's the only shot he fires at Jump Kick Man. And then Huebner comes here with a skateboard with the trucks facing Rittenhouse and goes to attack him, and Rittenhouse gets hit in the head, and then Huebner goes and grabs for Rittenhouse's weapon. So not only did he attack Rittenhouse with a deadly weapon, skateboard is a deadly weapon, he tried to take a deadly weapon from Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse fires, Huebner dies. And then we have Gage Grosskreutz, who runs up, stops, puts his hands up. I'm not going to shoot. He has a gun in his hand. Rittenhouse lowers his gun, and then Gage goes and points his gun at Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse pops back up, fires a shot. So, Gage admits this on stand. Rittenhouse does not fire until Gage himself points a gun at Rittenhouse. So those are all the crimes that Rittenhouse was accused of. It was a clear case of self-defense in like you could ever see. Okay, because every shot he fired was was directly attacking someone who was using deadly force against him or attempting to. It's a clear case of self-defense. All right, now you say out of state as well, if I remember, and too young, but I saw what he was trying to do and understand what he was trying to stand for. For me, it was a clear defense. I agree. As I just lined it all out, I agree. This out of state thing is a little wonky. Yes, technically he was out of state because he lived in like Illinois, I think, with his mom. But here's the thing. Although he was out of state, he went to high school in Kenosha. His father was in Kenosha. His grandparents were in Kenosha. He worked in Kenosha. So he had an actual stake in the community. He actually, although he didn't live there, he was there often enough that, you could say he has ties to that community. And too young, 17, maybe, I don't know about too young. But again, I think he was wrong in the sense that the fact that he was there in the first place, because he's an idiot. And there's no, why are you here? You should be playing video games and, making out with your girlfriend. If he was my son, I'd smack him beside the head and beat the shit out of him for being an idiot. But I'd be very proud of him that not only did he defend himself adequately, that's all he did. Every shot he fired went to someone. He didn't hit anyone, any innocence in the sense that they weren't attacking him. He didn't just go ham and unload. He fired as many shots as was necessary, and that's it. And that is very good self-control. Yeah, no problem. I'm very passionate about the Rittenhouse case because I think people just say a young kid, and again, dumb, very dumb. But if we look at the actual acts that happened, I think it was a very mature response that he did. The fact that he only fired the necessary amount of shots that were required and no more. Because I think, think about yourself. If you were in that situation, you had a bunch of people attacking you, would you really have the self-control to only fire the necessary amount of shots? Or would you unload your magazine? I think there's a lot of people that would unload the magazine. I think there would be very few people that would only fire the necessary shots. All right. There you go. You successfully distracted me, which is fine.
Okay. So that completes round 4 of the 3-minute uninterrupted rounds. If you guys are okay with it, we will move on to the 5-minute round where you guys are able to actually have open discourse.
Well,
with
I
each
have
other.
I have a quick counter if Destiny wants to agree to this for the purpose of fairness. I'm willing to do. I'm willing to do 2 rounds of internal critiques, and I'll allow Destiny to start with an internal critique if I can move to an internal critique after. So 2 5-minute rounds of internal critiques. Does that sound fair?
What do we mean when we say internal critique? What does that mean?
It means that I'm just here to answer your questions for 5 minutes, and you're here to answer mine.
So basically, what Andrew just proposed is an interrogation. So Destiny gets to interrogate him, and then afterwards, Andrew gets to interrogate him. So all they can't make any counterpoints. They just answer whatever questions that the other poses. That's what Andrew is proposing here, and I think that would be a great thing to see.
Sure.
Okay, I'll let you go first.
Okay, so okay, just so I make sure I have this right, so I can moderate it properly. Is he going to question you, Andrew, and you're going to answer?
He gets round 1 5 minutes, and then I get round 2 5 minutes.
Okay, so basically, so it's essentially a Q&A between the two of you where, so our Destiny, if you're okay with that, we can do that, or we can go to just open discourse between the two of you where you
I think I feel like I'd probably, because I feel like part of my argument is going to be that he hasn't put forth like a positive position yet for me to even attack or interrogate. So I'm not even sure what I would do on the Inquisition round. So I feel like it'd be better to just do back and forth.
Okay, well.
And so Destiny just ran away from it. He initially said, okay, but then he's like, well, I don't know what questions I would ask. So here's the thing, though. Here's he could have asked the definition. Now, I don't know if in this instance, Andrew would have answered this, but he could have asked the question, what's your definition of an insurrection? Now, Andrew may have gone with I'm not going to, I don't have to provide a definition. That's not my burden. Okay. So that, maybe he would have answered it that way as he does later on, or maybe he'd actually answer that question because it was a Q&A. I don't know. But Destiny's like, well, I don't know what I would ask him about, so whatever.
Well, if you want to do it in the back and forth, I'm prepared for that too.
Okay, but you guys are good with no more. You don't need any more 3-minute rounds to solidify your stances? No? Okay. So I will go ahead and set the timer here for 5 minutes. I guess, who wants to kick it off?
I can kick it off real quick.
Okay.
So, Destiny, would you agree with me that the motivation for demonizing the opposition political party often revolves around calling them traitors, accusing them of treason, and pushing for some type of villainization that they are against the country, they are against you, they are against everybody?
For another debate, maybe, but that's not at all any of the subject matter here.
Well, I think it is. I think it ties in because I believe that the motivation for why you're claiming that the other side are a bunch of insurrectionists, though you have no direct evidence of this, and your own criteria is just that of basically a riot, that your motivation is just to demonize the opposition.
Sure, but this isn't a debate over my motivation. I could be motivated by 100 million different bad faith factors, and literally none of them would be relevant to this conversation. It could be the fact that the DNC actually paid me money to give this precise argument, and Kamala's on the phone with me right now, and it wouldn't have any impact on this particular debate.
I think it would be. I think that the motivation for why you're making the argument itself would have an impact on the debate. But I am willing to concede that if you just want to keep it to the material, we can. Let's move over to point 2 then. Point 2, you say resisting any law or interference with the course of a government proceeding wouldn't fit rioting itself. How does that not fit rioting itself? Of course it does.
Well, let's say, for instance, the purpose of a riot was because you felt like the law wasn't being enforced. It wouldn't make sense to call that part of an insurrection. Let's say, for instance, that there that there was a lynching of a person and you felt like the cops weren't, upholding their duty or whatever. And so you decided to have a protest that turns into a riot, and you'll show up with the goal of protesting and rioting because you felt like the law wasn't being carried out here. You wouldn't really call that an insurrection because they're not trying to contravene a legal process. Just because, again, you engage in unlawful conduct doesn't mean that you're trying to resist, like the implementation of the carrying out, resisting the laws.
That would be the same case with insurrection then. Insurrection would also require intent, right?
Yes, yeah. Correct. Yes. So the intent would be the contravening of the Electoral Count Act. When people say we need to march and make our voices heard on January 6th to the Capitol grounds where people are going to protest, they're protesting the execution of the Electoral Count Act, which demanded that Vice President Pence count the electoral votes. Donald Trump didn't want that. He made it very clear in the days preceding. Him, Bannon, Eastman, Chesbrough, and everybody else that was working alongside him, Sidney Powell, everybody else, was saying that we need to prevent Pence from counting the electoral vote. That was the execution of a lawful government function.
Yeah, but even if
called an act, and that's what people are going there to protest
but even
against.
if all that's true, Destiny, it still wouldn't matter because the events of January 6th themselves, the intent of the people could have just been to riot, not indeed to commit to any sort of treasonous insurrection activity. And you have failed to demonstrate this time and time again how this actually would meet the criteria of an insurrection. Them showing up, and just like your take in 2021, right? When you say, hey, look, the damage would have been way worse if they had shown up with the purposes of actual insurrection or some type of 1776 mindset. This is the most armed nation on planet Earth. How in the world can you say these people showed up specifically in order to do that? That makes no sense, man.
None of this law, none of that argumentation was stuck with her. People they obviously showed up to protest the certification of the vote. They were called there by Donald.
So yeah, they showed up to protest it. Then violence happened, turned into a riot. It's not an insurrection.
Trump,
if it's a non sequitur, then you in 2021 were using a non sequitur when you made the argument that from the appearance of this, it could not have been an insurrection.
2021 Destiny was incorrect because 2021 Destiny didn't have the historical context to understand an insurrection. If you want to bring him on here and talk to him, you can.
I am
don't
talking
agree with
to him.
everything that
You're
I said.
not
You're
you.
not. I am 2024 Destiny. I have learned more things. I have done more studying. I've read more papers, and I've done more research on this. There is actually a strong understanding of what an insurrection is, and there was a strong historical understanding of what an insurrection is. And the idea that a bunch of people were called on January 6th, the date wasn't a mistake. When Donald Trump sent them down there to protest, when he said we need Mike Pence to do the right thing, what was he talking about? He wanted him to contravene the law, and that's what people marched down there for him to do.
Donald Trump said 30 minutes before this began that this needed to remain a peaceful protest on Twitter.
No, he didn't. He never said that.
He did. I actually have the tweet. I have the tweet. He did say that.
In the speech, he said to fight like hell, and in the speech, he said that we need to go down.
I'm talking about his tweets. Why would a person put out a tweet to be peaceful if their intent was insurrection, Destiny?
Why would a person call a protest on January 6th? What do you think they were protesting?
Why would someone call protest? Well, protesting is the most legal way to the correct way to make your voice heard, and saying I don't agree with this. I'm going to protest this. Okay, that's the freest way of us to express our opinion. What are you talking about, Destiny? Why do you think they went to They went to protest and make their voices heard, saying, we don't agree with us. Listen to us. It's just what we do. That's what we do. So, this didn't happen according to Destiny. Well, let's look at this. Here's Donald Trump. Please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They are truly on our side. Stay peaceful. I am asking for everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful. No violence. Remember, we are the party of law and order. Respect the law and our great men and women in blue. Thank you. But according to Destiny, this didn't happen.
What do you mean? They call protest. People call protests all the time. That doesn't mean that
we're not talking about other protests. I'm asking you, what was the purpose of the protest on January 6th?
The purpose of the protest was to go out and show support for Donald J. Trump.
For what?
Well, there was a variety of reasons. I think.
No, wait. Are you telling me we can't?
I'm going to give you a variety of reasons. You can't say no. Are you saying there wasn't a variety of reasons why people didn't show up?
Nope. I think there was one clear reason.
Oh, there's only one reason why everybody showed up.
10 seconds.
Correct.
10 seconds.
Okay. What is the one clear reason? There was not a variety of reasons. Some people didn't show up just because they wanted to see what was happening. Some people didn't show up just to support the president. Some people didn't show up because they really like to go to protest. Everybody showed up for one reason, right?
I didn't say everybody showed up for one reason. I said they were called there for one reason, and that was to protest the certification of the election.
Guys, that is time. I'm happy to let this play out longer if you guys want, and add an extra minute to the clock. Are you guys okay with that?
Yeah, we can add an extra
I'll add
minute.
an
I'm
extra
fine
minute
with
to the
that.
clock, and this is still round 1 of the open discourse, but just try to limit it to 1 minute, and then we'll go into round 2 of it, and we can go from there. And if we need more rounds at the 5-minute mark, we can absolutely do that. So I
have a problem with him ascribing motivation to all. He says there's one clear reason why everybody showed up. That's clearly not true. That doesn't even logically make sense. He could never demonstrate in a million years that there was only one clear reason why everybody showed up. That's a nonsensical argument, Destiny.
That's not the argument that I'm making. If the debate is whether or not January 6th is an insurrection, not did every single person on January 6th engage in the crime of insurrection, or did every single person on January 6th go with the intent to commit an insurrection. Then why did you say there was one clear reason? I said that there was a clear reason why people were called there, because there was. Donald Trump called people there to protest not on January 5th and not on January 7th and not in a random part of DC and not in a random part of the country. He called them on January 6th.
This is a very dumb point by Destiny. Okay, if you're going to go and protest something, wouldn't you want to protest it where it's most effective? Okay, did the people did MLK, and sit in protest? Did they just go and sit in some random fucking place that allowed colored people to sit there? No, they went into establishments that had white only sections and colored people sections. That's what that's where they did their sit-in. So of course you would go to go and protest specifically, a place, in a place specifically what you're protesting. That makes the most sense. Like when Roe v. Wade got thrown out, and people in New York, California were protesting it. That didn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense. California, New York, they're going to keep your abortions. Okay. If you're going to protest and try and be effective, you should be going to other places, other states that are going to enact an abortion ban in those states to make your voice heard and protest there. It didn't make any sense. Why the fuck would Kentucky give two shits what people in California do? That doesn't make any sense. So Destiny Point doesn't make sense. Well, they went on a particular day to a particular area. Well, yeah, because on the particular day, that's when it was going to happen. Okay, makes a lot of sense. That's when they'll all be there. That's when everyone will be paying attention. Be right. That makes perfect sense. They went on to a particular area. Well, yeah, it makes perfect sense that they would go to protest in a particular area. What are you talking about?
To the ellipses that was less than a mile walk away from the Capitol building, which is where he sent every single person after his speech. He called them there on the day of the certification of the vote.
That doesn't tell us their motivation.
Trying to pressure Pence to overturn the election.
That doesn't tell us their motivation.
That they need to go and protest for the lawful slates of electors to be counted, the illegitimate ones that he submitted, and people went there.
Even if I grant your logic,
violent behavior, and they managed to delay the certification of the election, which is exactly. So then, do you admit then that
no, I don't admit anything. Even if I grant your logic,
they happen to do every single thing that an insurrection calls for without actually engaging in an insurrection.
Guys, give me a chance to respond. I not only do I concede nothing, but your logic.
We ran out of time on that round. So what I'll do is this: I can see that this is a dynamic conversation, and clearly it's going to go out the bounds sometimes of a time round. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and set the clock for 10 minutes. That completes round 1 of the open discourse, but I see that this is a dynamic argument. Me just stopping it randomly at 5 minutes would probably be stupid. So I'm going to let it play. I'll put 10 minutes on the clock and have you guys go at it. Is that okay with both of you?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Destiny, are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because I don't want to interrupt you guys again like that. So I'll just go ahead and put 10 minutes on the clock, and I will start it right now. You guys, you can pick right off where you left off, Andrew. Yeah. Sorry about that.
So to respond, right, and I'll be more charitable.
Now, I'm sure you might be, well, why is it? Well, you got to have some sort of structure in this debate, or these two guys will just, talk over and this will go on forever. You got to have some structure. That's why there's time limits and stuff. It's how you do an actual debate. So what you've seen in that is an actual debate here.
With the time back your way now that we have 10 minutes, Destiny, but it's actually an illogical argument to make, to say, even if Donald Trump had some certain intent in his head, that would not mean that the people who were showing up for the protest had that intent. So the thing is like for you, both ways, it's a double entendre for your own logic. Either one, you claim, wait a second, there's one clear reason everybody showed up, or two, no, there was no clear reason why everybody showed up. They had multiple motivations, even if Trump himself had a different motivation. This is illogical argumentation.
I'm sorry, but this would never be applied to anything. If somebody says, "Hey guys, we're all going to show
That's
up,"
not an
so we can
argument
go
either.
and I'm making the argument right now. If somebody were to make the call and say, "Hey guys, we're all going to show up to go and blow this building up," and a bunch of people,
Yes, but now you are specifically calling for something. This is a bad argument by Destiny. He's saying like, "Hey, hold on, let me
people
look
showed up, and then a bunch of them marched for the crowd, and then they all went, and a building got blown up, we wouldn't say like, "Oh, well, we don't know what the intention of the crowd was. We don't know what the intention of the leader there."
See, again, this is a bad argument because there's a specific call to go and blow up a building. There's a specific call, and then that specific thing happened. So that's not an actual good argument here, because you just described something specifically being called for and specifically happening. Donald Trump said, make your voices heard, fight like hell, shit of that nature. That's not a specific call to go and stop the election votes or whatever. It's fucking, stop this. There wasn't that. There wasn't a specific call. Fight like hell. Okay. That doesn't necessarily mean go and actually fight. It means fight as in make your voices heard. Fight for your rights. Fight for your voice, your voice to be heard. Let them hear you. Shit like that. Like, and it's the same point I have with this whole the whole Biden thing where they were saying, oh, well, Biden called for the assassination of Trump because he said, put your bullseye back on Trump. It's a very bad interpretation of this. It's the same thing Destiny's doing here. Okay. I don't think when Biden said you need to put the bullseye back on Trump was a call for someone to go and shoot Trump. I don't think that at all, because it was very clear saying, hey, don't focus on my terrible, terrible debate I did. Focus on Trump and how terrible he is. That was the legitimate call. Or that's what he was saying. He wasn't making some sense, like some sort of, hey, just so you know, hey, go, I'm just subtly telling you to go and assassinate him. That's what I'm subtly saying. No, he's saying, stop focusing on me and how terrible I did. Focus on how terrible Trump is. So dumb. And then Destiny's over here saying like, well, when he says fight like hell, he means he's, go and make an actual literal fight and stuff. Because he didn't say fight like hell, make your voices heard. He didn't say any of that shit extra.
There was. We don't know what actually happened there because we can't divine the intention of every single individual person.
That's a ridiculous straw man.
We can say you can call it a straw man, but the idea that in order for me, okay, hold on. What would I need to show?
Hang on, let me respond to your first argument.
Wait, hold on. What would I need to show?
Wait, no, there's no spurting. Let me respond to the argument.
But you're not even letting me talk. You can respond to my argument. You
made an argument. Let me respond, and then you can ask the second argument. I think that's fair. So when you're talking about this from a logical standpoint, when you say, oh, if somebody called and said, hey, we're all going to blow this building up, yes, I would agree that you could probably ascribe the motivation to it then. Can you show me a tweet or any type of anything from Donald Trump saying, hey, guys, show up, we're going to do an insurrection? No, you just made the shit up.
Okay, fine. So I can. So as part of Donald Trump's speech, I'll give you 2 quotes. Our country has had enough. We will not take it anymore. And that's what this is all about. And to use a favorite term that all you people really came up with, we will stop the steal. Today, I will lay out just some of the evidence proving that we won this election. We won it by a landslide. This was not a close election. The first quote. The second quote, we must stop the steal. And then we must ensure that such outrageous election fraud never happens again, can never be allowed to happen again. When he says stop the steal, when they're at the Capitol building on January 6th, and when the election is being certified, what does stop the steal mean there?
Wait a second. So first of all, you're attributing to Donald Trump's rhetoric here something which he may not have intended. None of that actually shows or demonstrates that he was calling for an insurrection on the Capitol. You are just kind of ascribing that motivation onto it for the purposes of convenience. You have to show me there where he calls, like your example was, if I say we're all going to show up and blow up this building, that was your example, and then people show up and do it, we can understand their motivation. I agree. You have to show me where he says, okay, guys, we're all going to show up and do an insurrection. You can't then take words that don't say anything about an insurrection and say, but I think he meant that, though.
So then just before I answer this, what would I have to show you to show that an insurrection was what Trump was planning? What kind of evidence would you need?
You would have to give me the criteria first and foremost of something which fit the criteria of an insurrection better than some other thing. And you would have to make it refutable to that thing from what people were charged under. So if the criteria is, I'm going to give you what I think an insurrection is, and it fits a different criteria better than an insurrection, and under that criteria, that's what people were basically charged under, then it sounds like the other thing makes more sense than an insurrection.
So are we going with the
totally
argument that
seems to
for
track
X
to me.
event to have happened, X, like some person needs to have been charged with the crime?
No, your logic there is faulty as well.
No, what Andrew is saying is you need to be able to refute, like saying they were charged improperly. This is how they should have been charged. Okay. But the charges is just a secondary thing. What Andrew's saying here is, all right, the criteria you gave me fits the definition of a riot. Doesn't fit the definition of an insurrection that good, but it fits the definition of a riot. And to add on to that, not only does it fit the definition of a riot, the elements of a riot is what people were charged with. The elements of an insurrection that you laid out, no one was charged with it. It's just an additional thing to say, hey, I'm just proving my point here that this was more your outline of an insurrection fits more with a riot. And I have additional information. I have additional proof that says it does fit a riot more because people were charged with a riot. Again, Andrew's point kind of would have been like it would have been like a neutral thing between them. Destiny would be saying, "Oh, well, I say this fits an insurrection better," and Andrew would say, "Well, I think it fits a riot better," and be a neutral thing. But Andrew has a one up here where he says, "Not only do I think that it fits a riot better, I also have proof that it does because people were charged with elements of a riot." There you go.
Well, why do you have the second element there for me proving?
Let me respond.
Hold on,
So,
you can't just talk for 20 minutes and then as soon as I say one sentence,
you can't ask me a question and then move to another question.
I can ask you a question and then ask another question as part of my question. I'm able
but I wasn't even able to respond.
You gave two elements to what I needed to prove. The second one was that I have to show why people weren't charged with a crime. I've answered this thing 50 million times. We can send our just as one point if you want. Just because somebody hasn't been charged with the crime of X doesn't mean that an event related to X didn't occur. This is true.
Yeah, but the opposite would equally be true. The opposite is also true.
Just because we're at again, Destiny is saying, well, just because people weren't charged with X doesn't mean X didn't happen or they didn't do X. And Andrew is saying, well, just because just because they weren't charged with X doesn't mean they did X, or it could mean they didn't do X. So they're at a neutral point here, and that's what Destiny doesn't understand. Is the reason Andrew keeps bringing that up is the fact that it just cancels out what it's just like it just cancels out what he's saying. Okay, that's all it does. It just cancels out Destiny's point because there's just a good of chance that the reason they weren't that they did X, but they weren't charged with it. Okay, it's just as a valid point as they weren't charged with X, therefore X they didn't do X.
Because they weren't charged with the crime of X doesn't mean they committed the crime of X either.
I'm not making that argument. You're using this argument as a way to negate my argument.
Yes,
I'm not making
it's called a counter argument. Yes.
No, hold on. That would be like you saying John couldn't have murdered Jane because John wasn't there. And then I say, well, no, that's not true. And then you going, well, just because John was there doesn't mean that he murdered Jane.
Nope, the opposite.
That's not the element that I'm giving.
The opposite is true.
I've given you four clear things.
Wait. No, wait. Hang on. The opposite is true.
An argument or give me a definition of insurrection. Or do you think it's
stop. Hang on. The opposite is true. I'm not saying that. So you say, oh, John murdered Jane. But that can't be true because he also may not have murdered Jane. You're making the claim John murdered Jane. And so I say, okay, that's your claim that he murdered Jane. Can you define for me what the criteria would be in which you would consider this to be murder? And you go, well, and then you define for me something that is not murder or fits some other criteria better. Would not a rational human being, including you, take that and understand, wait, if it fits this other criteria better, it probably isn't actually murder.
What part of...
So for example, okay, maybe I can help flesh that out better. And maybe I can't. But for example, say Destiny says, John murdered Jane. Okay? John murdered Jane. And then, he lays out a definition of murder that he thinks, would fit this thing. And and Andrew says, well, this actually fits more with I don't know, like an accident that fits more with your definition of murder fits more with I don't know, self-defense or some shit like that. So and so maybe instead he he just defended himself, and that is what happened. I think that, maybe that makes sense. Maybe that doesn't. I don't fucking know.
Mark, can you give me an example? I'm just curious.
Oh,
and
let me try
Actually
again.
murder. And understand, wait, if it fits this other criteria better, it probably isn't actually murder.
So if Destiny laid out definition of murder, and Andrew says, well, this actually fits up the definition of self-defense, so it probably wasn't murder, it was probably self-defense.
Murder.
What part of can you give me an example? I'm just curious, and I shouldn't even engage with this because just up to this point, you've given me no definition of insurrection. You seem unwilling to commit.
It's not my burden.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm just saying you've given me no definition of insurrection.
I'm giving you nothing.
So then my question would be, can you give me a riot?
Burden.
Can you give me a riot that would fit all 4 points that I've given
not my
what
burden
I've
to
defined
do.
in insurrection? Well, then you must accept my definition of insurrection.
I don't need to accept. Why would I need to accept your definition?
Because you're saying that my definition of insurrection isn't valid because it also applies to riots. And I'm telling you very clearly, no, it doesn't, because riots don't typically happen in a planned manner to contravene the
riots can't happen in a planned manner. What are you talking about, Destiny?
Execution of some government function or the implementation
of happened to prevent trial from happening. So riot, or is that an insurrection?
Some particular law.
That's not what your definition says. Your definition says under point 2, resisting any
some
law
or interfering with the course of a government proceeding.
Yeah, so you're just changing your definition.
I'm not resisting. Do you think that resisting a law is the same thing as breaking a law?
I think that it could be synonymous inside of people's minds, but no, I could see the distinction with merit. But when you say resisting any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding, that sure sounds like a fucking riot to me, Destiny.
Okay, can you give me an example of a riot where that happens?
Where BLM burned down a police station. That seems like it's resisting the law.
Yeah, so that's what law were they resisting the implementation of? What
the law of arson, the law of rioting, all sorts of laws.
So you're telling me that those riots were trying to make it so that arson was legal? Can you point me to a tweet? Can you point me to a statement where somebody was saying we're rioting because we think that the laws against arson
wait a second.
are illegal?
Can you show me in your definition where it says that the purpose of the insurrection is so that they can make something else legal? Because that's nowhere in your definition, Destiny.
Resisting any law or interfering in the course of a government
doesn't say anything about making something else legal. You just made it up.
No, you're saying that they're resisting the law of arson. Nobody's arguing that the law of arson is bad. Just because you're breaking a law doesn't mean you're resisting the law.
What's the or?
The or
3 minutes. 3 minutes.
It says or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Would you not consider, if somebody interfered with the FBI, for instance, for that to be interfering with the course of a government proceeding? Or if somebody interfered with police officers, that would be interfering with the course of a government proceeding?
Police officers are not federal police officers. If you want to talk about
again, nothing in Destiny's definition requires federal. And again, I would say that you could absolutely insurrect against a state government.
If you want to talk about, where you are, because we're talking about January 6th.
We have your definition. It's not required.
Where did January 6th happen?
But it does. We have your definition.
Why would I be arguing about the definition of an insurrection in a state when we're talking about an insurrection that happened?
Well, then can you show me in your definition where it says it must be federal for an insurrection?
I don't need to. We're talking about insurrection.
Well, then if it doesn't, it doesn't matter. So then any of the criteria which would apply at the state level would still apply at the federal level for rioting. It's the same thing.
I don't know if insurrections are state defined. I'm not.
There's state laws against insurrection. Therefore, it is defined.
Aware of that in the historical record.
Well, you can't have a state insurrection?
I'm not aware of some. Can you show me where in the historical record?
I'm just asking why you couldn't have one.
Because I'm not aware of any having occurred historically.
Something has to occur for it to be possible? That doesn't make any sense. So just because a state insurrection hasn't happened, that means that you can't insurrect against a state? That doesn't make any sense.
I mean, you couldn't have one.
You just claimed that it's possible.
I didn't make a claim.
Oh, okay. Then no one is claiming here that an insurrection is.
No, you are making a claim. You're making a claim on
I'm
your
making a positive claim that there could be a federal insurrection because I have a historical record of there being statements about insurrections federally and historically. I've never had a statement about a state insurrection. I'm not aware of any of those. If you are aware of one of those,
not being aware of any doesn't mean that the criteria could not apply to a state insurrection, correct?
That's correct, but we are talking about an insurrection that happened on federal grounds. So we're obviously talking about federal
but your definition doesn't require federal anything. That's not what your definition.
What Andrew is saying is in Destiny's definition, it doesn't say this must be federal. That's what what Andrew's pointing out is like there's nothing in this just because they're talking about January 6th. If you took all the elements that Destiny named that would fit his criteria of insurrection, but you did it at the state level, okay? Would that not be an insurrection? Yes or no? So again, if you took all the all the criteria that Destiny says this is what makes an insurrection, but instead of doing it at the federal level, you'd state it at a state government or a county government or whatever. Name a government that you did it against that wasn't a federal government or federal or pertain to federal law. Would that not be an insurrection? This doesn't make any sense.
Okay. I think if the only holdout you have is that your definition of resisting a particular law just means that you are breaking a law, then I think I'm satisfied.
No, it's not. Or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. This could be localized for non-localized.
It can't be. No one here has made any claims about a non-federal interest. Okay, well, if those are your two holdouts that you
what does interfering with the course of a government proceeding mean? What does that mean?
The record that I'm invoking, we're especially talking about things relating to insurrection, and we're talking about the invocation of insurrection, which is my understanding has only ever happened in federal law and in stuff relating to the United States government, not a state government. If you want to show me it happening or show me a historical record or a state constitution or a state criminal statute that references insurrection, then we can talk about that if you want to.
What does or interfering with the course of a government proceeding mean, Destiny?
Or interfering with the course of the implementation or the execution of some particular federal law.
It has to be federal?
Yes, because we're talking about the federal government.
No, that doesn't mean it. Hang on. So you're doing a classic kind of Destiny bait and switch where you say in this particular case it would because that's what we're talking about. Okay, that's fair, but that doesn't mean that that's what the definition says. The definition itself does not say that it must be federal. It doesn't say that.
Agree with my definition.
It doesn't say that anywhere. What does or interfering with the course of a government proceeding mean? What does it mean?
That real quick, guys. That is 10 minutes. What I could do is, because I see that there's a discussion here between federal, if an insurrection can be federal or state, I will go ahead and reset the clock. I think maybe this is something that we can kind of hone in on. Can an insurrection be, obviously we're talking about it from federal level, but can also be at a state level. Do you guys want to shift that conversation to there and make this round specifically for that? Are you guys okay with that?
I don't know. State insurrection. I'm just not even aware of that even being a thing. I don't think I've ever heard of that.
I don't know. Destiny, were the DC cops local?
I'll put the clock for 5 minutes.
The DC cops were federal.
No, all of them were federal, eh?
The District of Columbia is federal.
So they have no state police there at all?
What state police would they have there?
I don't know. I'm just asking.
I don't believe so, no. I'm pretty sure even the National Guard there directly, like the chain of command goes up to the president, not a state governor.
Did states have state governments?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I don't understand why you couldn't have an insurrection against a state government by this definition.
You should consult the historical record and come with an example next time.
Well, just because you never have one, I'm asking you if you can.
I'm not here to debate whether or not you can have an insurrection against a state government.
Well, I don't understand if your definition doesn't include
January 6th. No, this is like asking if a murder occurred on January 6th. In that case, I would only be talking about murder as it's defined in federal law, not in state law. We're talking about an insurrection on whether or not January 6th.
Sorry. Let's listen to that back. Hold on.
Was an insurrection as it's defined in federal law, not in state law. January 6th. In that case, I would only be talking about murder as it's defined in federal law, not.
Yeah. Murder is not a federal law. Murder is not a federal law. It's only state law. Okay. Can't get charged with murder on a federal level. Sorry.
And state law. We're talking about an insurrection on whether or not January 6th was an insurrection or not. So I'm only going to be appealing to federal law or federal historical understandings of an insurrection against the United States. So I don't know why we're saying, well, what about a state insurrection? I don't know. I'm not even aware if a state insurrection is a possible thing. I've never heard of that reference before. It's not semantic. It's legal and it's historical. And that's where the understanding
is rooted. I'm fine with a semantic distinction. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm actually just trying to make one. So you agree that you gave me a definition that it nowhere includes the word federal, correct?
I also didn't give you a definition that includes the word human or that includes the words like in this present point of time and not like in the future or time traveling in the past, or that doesn't include like dimension C138, or that like there's a million other things that I didn't include.
Yeah, I don't know what that has to do with anything.
Because why would I include the definition of against the United States when we're talking about an insurrection that happened on federal grounds?
Because
if you
your
want, I
definition of an
could
insurrection
simply
matters.
add. Okay, well in that case, I will simply add on my 2nd
Aren't
part.
you appealing to a state court, for instance? Like, what are you talking about here?
Appealing to a state court for what?
Aren't you appealing to a state court for this definition? Isn't that what you said? Did I get that wrong?
I'm appealing to right now. I'm appealing to federal history. What are you talking about?
Well, I'm asking, where did you get this definition? Let's start with that.
Well, he got portion of his definition from the state of Colorado. And again, so you're telling me if someone did all of these elements that Destiny laid out, but they only did it at the state level, okay? Only a state law, whatever, okay? They only did it at a state level. Would that not be an insurrection against the government? The state government? Like, there's no logic here at all in Destiny's side. I think he really realized that Andrew's bodying him at this point, and he's got him cornered. And so he's trying to weasel his way out by saying, oh, well, this requires federal, but nowhere in his definition did it require federal.
There's a writer who studied I think it was constitutional law specializing in the 14th Amendment. His name is Mark Graber, and these are the 4 qualifications that he basically lists out, and then he goes through a number of historical examples to say as much. There's also a much longer paper written about the I think it's like the sweeping power of Section 3, written by I think Baud and Paulson, who write like a 130-page paper where they go through listing like the historical understanding of insurrection. If you want, we can dive through any part of the paper, or
does he say in this paper that it's a requirement that this be done at the federal level?
I don't think anybody talks about state insurrections. I don't think you can levy war or engage in insurrection against a state. I'm just not aware of that. I've never heard of that brought up before.
Yeah, but
I'm just like, for instance, like when you say treason, if I were to give you a definition of treason, I don't know if you can commit treason against like the state of Iowa. I think that's only a federal crime.
I have no idea either. This is why I'm asking.
I can't say I can't say for sure because maybe there is evidence of it out there, but I don't know. Prepared to debate that because there's a debate about federal.
All I'm doing is doing an internal critique to try to figure out if this is consistent across the board. Your definition. I'm not even saying that.
So I just want to go back.
There's necessarily
a debate about federal because
this is why I'm asking.
I can't say I can't say for sure because maybe there is evidence of it out there, but I don't know. Prepared to debate that because there's a debate about federal.
All I'm doing is doing an internal critique.
Only of treason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but
I'm just for instance, like when you say treason, if I were to give you a definition of treason, I don't know if you can commit treason against like this.
All right. So he's saying, I don't know if you can commit treason against the state. Well, in the United States, there are both federal and state laws prohibiting treason. Okay. And there have let's see. Constitutionally, U.S. citizens who live in a state owe allegiance to at least 2 government entities, United States of America, and their state of legal residence. Only 2 prosecutions for treason against a state were ever carried out in the U.S., one against Thomas Dorr and the other against John Brown's conspiracy. So those were just both state treasons that were prosecuted. So yes, you can commit treason against the state
of Iowa. I think that's only a federal crime.
I have no idea either. This is why I'm asking.
I can't say I can't say for sure because maybe there is evidence of it out there, but I don't know. Prepared to debate that because there's a debate about federal.
All I'm doing is doing an internal critique to try to figure out if this is consistent across the board. Your definition. I'm not even saying that there's necessarily anything wrong with it, but what I am saying is that there's something wrong with the fact that it seems to fit rioting far better than it would in insurrection. So if we go over these one at a time. An assemblage would fit a riot. That's what Destiny says. By force or intimidation fits a riot. That's what Destiny says.
It's an assemblage of people for a common purpose.
Yeah.
Okay. An assemblage of people. Yes.
Riot.
So they've come for a common purpose. Okay. And then 2 is to resist any law or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Right. Resisting a law. Resisting a law. That's not just breaking a law, but you're there to resist a particular law. There's one you really don't like. And then 3, you're showing up.
Yeah, but wait, we have the or there. We have the or interfering with the course of a government proceeding. Wouldn't that be even resisting police? Wouldn't that qualify for that?
No, a government proceeding would be like the Senate confirming like an officer of the.
What about a court? What about a court? The state Supreme Court. Would that not be a government proceeding if you interfered with a state Supreme Court? What are you talking about, Destiny?
Of the executive agency.
You would
like
have to demonstrate that. I don't believe that that's true. I think that you can interfere with government proceedings, even absent there being some actual proceeding that you're interfering with. I think that
if you would like to introduce
localized laws,
that's fine. And if you would like to introduce your own unique definition of insurrection, you can.
Why would I need to do that? We have.
Because I'm unaware in the historical record of anybody suggesting that interfering with police officers is a matter of insurrection or can lead to an element of insurrection.
Are there laws against rioting?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I know there's laws against like things that happen in rioting. I don't know if there's a law of rioting.
Are you resisting those laws when you're rioting?
No.
You're not resisting those laws when you're rioting?
No, unless you're literally rioting to say we should make rioting legal or we need to get rid of the prohibition on rioting.
And that is 5 minutes.
Why would that be a qualification to resist the laws?
Because breaking the law and do you acknowledge that breaking the law and resisting the law are not the same?
Well, tell me what the distinction is so I'm not confused anymore.
Breaking the law is when you do something that's illegal, and resisting the law is saying that this particular law shouldn't exist.
Yeah, okay, but if you're rioting, how do you go about resisting a law?
Well, you could riot for the purpose of overturning a particular law. You might say,
but you're resisting other laws then, right?
No, you're not. You're not saying that rioting should be made legal.
Yeah, but even if you weren't, you would still be resisting laws that were on the books against rioting.
So if I can't divorce, okay, we can just disagree here. If you think that resisting and breaking the law are the same thing, we're at an.
I didn't say that they're the same thing. I said that necessarily, if you're rioting to resist some other external law. So let's say I think that
hold on. Do you agree? Do you agree that you can engage in rioting? No. Do you agree that you can engage in rioting and accept that you might get arrested for rioting?
Yeah.
Then that defeats your entire argument. You can engage in rioting without resisting the law of rioting. Understand that? Well, I'm going to riot, but I might be arrested
that makes my argument. That makes my argument. So the thing is that even if I concede that it's true, that you could be, rioting with the expectation that you get arrested for this X thing, right? You could do this for murder as well. You could do this for basically anything. You could commit any crime with the expectation that you could be arrested for the crime itself. But that would not say that you're not resisting whatever the current laws were that were on the books about that crime. You're saying that the necessity here is that you are resisting some other thing. Fine. But you're also resisting laws by the very nature of rioting. So I don't know why you would have to have something which is externalized by you yourself are still breaking laws. I don't think.
How are you resisting the law? How are you resisting laws of rioting by rioting? Well, what does resist mean to you there? How are you defining resist?
Yeah. So assuming, I can give you an example of this. Let us assume for a second that people are rioting in an abortion clinic because they want abortion overturned. I think this is the spirit of your argument, right? So they're rioting in an abortion clinic. They want abortion to be overturned. You would agree with me then that they are pushing against abortion, but they're still breaking laws while they're rioting, right? So they are resisting current laws, even though they're resisting another current law. And I don't think that you would consider that to be an insurrection, even though it could fit all of the criteria of these elements. It's an assemblage for sure. You're resisting some other law that you don't like, or you're interfering with the course of a government proceeding. You would say that fits criteria too. You would say that this is by force or intimidation, and you would say it's for a public purpose. But that clearly is not an insurrection, Destiny.
The issue is that like abortion is not like this isn't a federal law. I could just grant you that we can move.
Again, there's nothing in his definition that requires him that requires it to be a federal law. Because again, you can resist it. You can insurrect against the state government. And again, in his definition, there's nothing against that says federal law. Just because you're talking about a federal insurrection that you call it, doesn't mean your definition requires a federal, it to be a federal law. And abortion actually was federal law for a while.
Move to the state example, since you seem unable or unwilling to differentiate.
Let's assume for a second that it was. Let's assume for a second it was a federal law.
Okay, you know what? Actually, we can do that. Let's say that the federal government passed a law either allowing or not allowing all abortion. Okay, the government either allows it, everybody can have an abortion whenever they want, or nobody can have an abortion. Okay, let's say that I gather a group of people and I say, listen, okay, fuck this abortion law. We're all going to get together and we're going to go protest. Okay, and we're protesting. The goal of our protest, all right, is we want to get rid of the abortion thing, whether it was passed or made illegal. Okay, we want to get rid of this law, and we're going to show up with a whole bunch of fucking people, and shit's going to get ratty, and we're going to, we know what we're doing. Okay, it's the day that in Capitol Hill that they're going to sign the law into whatever. We march down there, and in the course of protesting, like, it becomes a riot, and the riot and everything there was because of that particular law being signed into practice. I would say, yeah, that was an insurrection. You've shown up with a group of people. You're resisting the passage of some particular law. You're showing up through force or intimidation, and you end up exercising that. And then it's for the public purpose of a particular law that impacts everybody in the United States. I would say that is an insurrection. Yes. Would you say it's not?
So if
would you say that that's not an insurrection?
Yeah, I would say that it would not be an insurrection, at least by this criteria. That would just seem to me, again, to be a riot. That would seem to fit the criteria, again, of a riot better than an insurrection. I still can't exactly figure out the delineation point, and I'm trying to. And now, to be fair to you, it is nebulous. I understand it's nebulous, but I'm also not the one who's making the affirmative claim. You are. So you're saying that if a bunch of fucking dope smoking hippies wanted to resist the federal law of being able to smoke marijuana on federal land, and they all showed up and they got stoned, and then they started rioting, that would be a fucking insurrection?
If they went there with a common purpose, they were trying to resist the implementation and execution of a particular law. Yeah, theoretically it could.
Well, no, they're just resisting, right? They're just resisting a law. They're saying, we're here to protest the fact, man, that we can't smoke weed on federal property, man. So they all grab their blunts and they start toking up in protest.
10 seconds.
Right. And then they start a fire.
What do you have?
And kick some stuff. And kick some stuff.
Do you think
hang on, I just want to make sure. You think
it could be, yes.
That would be an insurrection?
The historical record, it could be, yes. Do you have any definition of insurrection whatsoever? Or do you
don't need to give you a counter definition.
If you're not going to give me a counter definition, I can give you the riot definition doesn't include necessarily a public purpose. I've already given examples of riots that wouldn't fit my definition of insurrection, and I really only need to give one, and I automatically win. A riot could very much be in response to a particular sports team winning a game. Boom. That's an example of a riot. It doesn't fit my definition of an insurrection. I've differentiated the two, and unless you're going to give me any countervailing definitions, I automatically satisfy that element.
Yeah, but I already did.
Claim,
we're interfering with the course of a government proceeding in and of itself. I think that the necessity of rioting in and of itself. What if you blockade a federal highway?
Wait, the necessity of rioting in and of itself. Wait, what?
I think,
no, hold on, wait. To be clear,
rioting,
do you acknowledge that I just gave you? Do you acknowledge that I just gave you an example of a riot that wouldn't be an insurrection under my definitions?
So I think that would even be appropriate. I think that you could give me tons of definitions of riots that would not fit this definition of an insurrection, but that would not mean that this definition doesn't fit the definition of riot better than insurrection. You understand?
Wait, so if somebody was protesting and it got really violent after a sports game, how would my definition fit that better than insurrection fit that?
Well, what if they were blockading a federal highway? Would that be interfering with the course of government proceedings because there's a federal law that says you can't blockade byways on federal highways? I mean, this is the thing. Is that
I don't know. I don't think that counts
this becomes so. Do you see what I mean? Though this becomes so broad that we can begin to just add all sorts of things and call them insurrections.
What is the government proceeding?
Let me give you an example. So if we're going to be totally good faith here, right, which I've been trying to be this entire debate, and I think you would concede that, if we're going to be really good faith here, do you really believe that if a bunch of hippies showed up to smoke a bunch of dope on federal property, okay, and a few of them got wild and started a fire and kicked some shit, right? And fucking, I don't know, somebody got beat up with a bat because there was tens of thousands of them who showed up for that protest. Do you really believe that that would fit the criteria of what most people think of, including you, as an insurrection?
If they didn't go there united by like a particular public purpose,
the public purpose was they were going against this federal law. They don't want the federal law. They're resisting that federal law.
So that we don't have to waste more time on this. If you want to stack this enough, all I'm going to end up doing is saying that, like, yes, this would agree as I would agree that this would be an insurrection. You have it. You're not able to demonstrate. This is why I'm asking you, like, historically, can you give me an example of an event that you don't think I would want to classify as an insurrection?
I don't think I need to, because
as an insurrection. But if you're just going to give me examples where you're just going to need to,
well, here I can give. I'm going to give you the ultimate example right now.
Yeah, I would say that was an insurrection.
Nobody in good faith anywhere is going to agree with you that if a bunch of hippies showed up to resist the marijuana law on federal property, and then a few of them started a riot, that they would consider that insurrection against the United States. I don't believe you believe it. I don't believe your audience believes it. I don't believe anybody believes it. So if that is the case, that it's so broad that will encapsulate that, I'm actually fine leaving the debate there too.
Okay. I mean, again, it doesn't really matter what we would consider to be an insurrection. The only thing that really matters is what the historical record says is at the time was considered an insurrection.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Again, I
because
literally
nobody's
think
prosecuting anybody for it. So
you don't have to. Well, you're just retreading. Technically, I think this might be a gishgal, is when you keep bringing up arguments that have been rebuked over and over and over again.
I don't think
you can keep bringing it up over and over and over again. But again, we agree that like we can walk in and see, wow, this person was murdered, and go, oh, really? Who was charged with murder? Okay, fuck. Or wow, there sure was a riot here. We saw that a riot happened. Well, who was charged with rioting? Oh, fuck, I guess. Like you don't need a charge of a particular crime, and the barrier or the bar for charging somebody with a particular crime is probably a lot higher than declaring an event a thing itself.
Yes, but if you're using that event to declare and advocate, I would say, the justifiable ending of people's lives, I think it would be kind of appropriate to have someone actually be charged with that crime for you to advocate and be gleeful over the death of people because they support someone that you believe in is an insurrectionist, but the law that had the beyond reasonable doubt standard does not. And that's the problem with Destiny. He just the last couple weeks was advocating and gleeful, I would say, over the death of individuals and the attempted assassination. And he was really disappointed that Trump didn't die. Okay. I would say he did all of that over his opinion that something was an insurrection, but the standard of law beyond a reasonable doubt was not met, that they couldn't even charge anyone with. So I think that's important.
Doesn't make any sense to say because somebody hasn't been charged with a particular thing.
It also doesn't make any sense to say that
we're not talking about criminal charges.
It also doesn't make any sense that to say that because they haven't been charged with a particular thing, that means they're guilty of the particular thing either. That's the flaw in that argument. I pointed it out multiple times.
My criteria,
Your criteria
doesn't
actually flow with this correctly.
My criteria is not because they weren't charged. That's why it was an insurrection. I would never use that as part of my criteria. I don't know.
Yeah, well, hippies everywhere. Don't show up to federal property to protest by smoking weed, and because if a couple of you start a fire, you're going to get brought up on insurrection charges. Said nobody ever. That's insane.
I don't know why we keep bringing up insurrection charges. No one's talking about a criminal charge or a criminal proceeding here.
Yeah, criminal charge or criminal proceeding. That would be a charge, right? That's what.
Yeah, nobody's talking about that here. Nobody's talking about criminal charges here or criminal proceedings here.
So but you would still consider that an insurrection, right?
An insurrection doesn't have to be a criminal matter.
I just want to make sure that you would still consider that an insurrection.
If all four elements of what I said were met, then yes.
All right, fine. Well, then I'll leave the debate there. I'm good with that.
So what I'll do, so we went 7 rounds here, and I was just timing it and everything else like that. I see that there's obviously a difference of opinion in the definitions of what fits what, etc. So what I'll do is I'll go to closing arguments. I'll put, are you both okay with 3 minutes on the clock to make your closing argument? Or sure. I can make it a little bit longer if you guys want, and then we can close that after that.
Yeah, whatever you guys want to do.
Destiny, are you okay with 3 or do you want more?
3's probably fine.
3 minutes? Okay. Mm-hmm. Who wants to go first?
Well, I open first, so usually the person who opens closes last.
Okay. So, Destiny, I'll turn it to you. I'll put 3 minutes on the clock, and you can put your closing arguments here. And this was a fantastic discussion. Obviously, you have a good debate when the chat is like, if almost 50-50. So I'll go ahead and turn it to you, Destiny. And you.
Oh, no. I don't know if it was 50-50. I think more people are agreeing with Andrew.
You can give us your closing arguments, and then I'll go turn it to Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, historically, there have been examples of things that were considered insurrections that were incredibly small in nature, right? I don't know if anybody died at all in the Whiskey Rebellion. I'm pretty sure everybody that got arrested for that was acquitted. It was just people basically essentially protesting the whiskey tax laws. This wasn't a massive deal that had explosions and gunfire and deaths everywhere. I think that we just don't tend to view things as insurrections as much anymore because we don't tend to have insurrections as much anymore because that's kind of become the new norm as the United States has, traveled through or journeyed through time. I think that the 4 elements that I gave, I think we're pretty clearly met on January 6th. I think I've demonstrated that we can imagine a ton of events that are riots that wouldn't fit the 4 elements. I understand that Andrew has a really hard time understanding.
Yeah, what he doesn't understand is, there are riots that don't meet those elements, but they're therefore not an insurrection. But there are riots that meet those elements that Destiny's talking about and would not be considered an insurrection. Okay, the hippies the one Destiny lost when he agreed that if the pot smoking hippies met this criteria. That's an insurrection. No one believes like that's why Destiny lost. This end that was like the end for him for sure.
Between resisting a law versus just breaking a law. Just because somebody goes out and they engage in rioting doesn't mean that they are trying to resist the law of rioting, that they're trying to make it so that rioting is legal. That's the goal of that particular riot. Oftentimes, riots can be said to come together to protest other types of things where people feel like the law isn't being executed in a reasonable manner. To say that a bunch of people that show up and end up rioting as a result of a protest that's against, like, say, a cop they feel like wasn't fairly prosecuted is the same as a bunch of people showing up to resist the certification of the vote as laid out in the Electoral Count Act is just not at all the same thing. But we can continue to misread the second element of this, and I understand why, and that's because if you grant the definition or any definition of insurrection, January 6th almost certainly follows from it. And the only way to escape January 6th as being labeled as an insurrection is to use either a ridiculous type of definition that literally nobody historically has ever agreed to. And again, you will never find historical citations, people that use these very unique and contrived definitions of insurrection, or you set the bar of evidence as being unbelievably high, which is saying something like Donald Trump needed to say, hey, everybody, we're going to go do an insurrection. And absent that, even if he's telling people to fight like hell, even if he's tweeting the day before, Vice President Pence has the ability to overturn the election. Even if he's saying, like, we need to go down in March and fight like hell and take our country back, none of these things are going to matter if they don't actually use the word insurrection, which I guess means there's no such thing as an insurrection ever having occurred in all of U.S. history. I would say that if you argue with somebody who doesn't believe in a particular definition of insurrection, ask them, has any insurrection ever occurred ever? Which would you consider an insurrection? And then once they start to consider something as an insurrection, say, hey, well, what are the elements that make this an insurrection? Or even more, you could say, historically, what have judges and lawmakers considered an insurrection? People like Andrew.
So again, he's appealing to historically what have lawmakers considered an insurrection. Well, you know what lawmakers and judges didn't consider an insurrection? January 6th. There you go.
You will never do that. Instead, they will just play word games all day and try to say, well, riots fit, and what about states, and all these other things that aren't really relevant to defining an insurrection, which, however you define it, January 6th clearly was.
All right. Okay. That was 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I will turn it to you, Andrew, to make your closing arguments. And then, Andrew, from what I understand, you wanted to open up the phone lines, right, and have a discussion with the people after?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Even if Destiny has other places to go, I'm willing to stick around for call-ins. I've always done that on the Crucible.
Sure.
I
will, right now as we speak, Bills is firing up the phone line, so we'll get that phone number out and put it on the screen, and you guys can, Destiny, if you want to stay, you can telegraph it to your audience, and we can answer some questions for the people. But I will turn it to you, Andrew, to make your closing arguments. 3 minutes.
Yeah, well, it's really funny, this appeal to authority. Destiny grabs this entire nebulous definition from some guy that he respects on the internet and then claims that this is some authoritative definition. This is the authoritative definition because I read it from some guy on the internet. Oh, okay, great. Even though the courts themselves have not ruled on this, and nobody was charged with insurrection. Nobody was charged. Again, one more time, nobody charged with insurrection. Trump acquitted of inciting an insurrection, which, again, nobody was charged with. Talk about nebulous definition. He says, I'm playing word games. Meanwhile, he takes time today, all day, to assemble a 4-point, this is my definition, completely based on some other guy on the internet, which is crazy to me, right? This is Destiny's personal definition of what this means. And it clearly fits 3 of the criteria for rioting right off the gate. We only had an issue with 2. And then when we apply these, and remember my opening statement, I said in my opening statement, this is going to become very broad, right? There's no way that we're not going to be able to call all sorts of things insurrections that clearly are not insurrections. We come up with the idea of what if a bunch of dope smoking hippies all show up with the united purpose of smoking dope on federal land in order to resist the federal law. And then a couple of them start a fire and one gets beaten up with a baseball bat or something like this. Suddenly that's an insurrection. Clearly, nobody would think that that was an insurrection. Clearly, nobody would think that that's a completely unreasonable standard, right? But it's the Destiny standard. And the reason, again, that he had to have such a broad definition, the reason that he needed this, and he needed me to come in and give him some definition he could do an internal critique on, is because his idea that this was an insurrection is only there specifically to villainize the opposition for the purposes of demonization, so that when bad things happen to them, he can call them traitors. That's it. That's the whole game. It's been his whole game now for a while. And this is what got him on Pierce and all these other things, which I recently reviewed, was that take. And so in order for him to justify that take, he has to make you a traitor because you don't believe that that was an insurrection that nobody was charged with.
Okay. 2:15. Guys, that was fucking fantastic discussion. Obviously, people are going to have different viewpoints on where they go, but that's, I think, the beauty of any discussion like this in debate. That good debate always.
All right, so it's all over. That's the end of the debate. But I want to point something out here. Let's see. All right.
Anyone on now? I know we literally just opened them.
So here's something that's very important. Okay. And I'm going to play this, and then we're going to go over to something that just happened today. So, and I think it's this particular one. It's very interesting. Let's listen in.
But
yeah, we do.
okay, so as usual, guys, normal rules. If you want to skip the line, super chat the last 4 digits of your numbers in, and we will go ahead and get you on the line. Let's go ahead and hit the first caller here.
We got 6327. You're up. 6327. You are up.
Go ahead, 6327. And I'm going to be hosting a Zoom call after this, guys. Andrew, if you don't mind, drop it in on Castle Club after this.
Of course.
Awesome.
At your service. Thank you so much for hosting this, and you guys coming in on your day off.
You're welcome to if you want to jump in and talk to my.
Hey, you guys ready for me?
But yeah, go ahead. But we'll do calls for a bit, and then we'll switch on over to Castle Club. And I appreciate you guys doing that for me. If you guys want to, thank you, Andrew. And if you want to come in, Destiny, awesome. We got someone on the line, right?
Yeah.
Okay, brother. Tell us your name, where you're from, and hit us with your question.
My name's Rick from Miami, Florida. The question is for Andrew. Very frustrating on his side to see the debate on his side. So I really do need an answer of what his definition is for an insurrection.
Are you asking me my definition?
Andrew's. I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm not going to give you one. It's not my burden.
I feel like that's a cop-out. Okay, so that's all.
No, well, then you need to learn how to
question.
debate, because you not knowing how to debate doesn't mean that I'm copping out. It's not my position. The affirmative position, the person calling people insurrectionists, is not me.
Wait, how are we supposed to have a debate on if January 6th is an insurrection?
Okay. Now listen to what Destiny says. It's very important.
We don't even have a definition of insurrection.
Why do I need to have a definition to note that whatever definition that you could come up with would be too broad to apply to this? That's not a logical statement.
Hold on one sec.
So
wait, hold on.
He came in with some facts. He came in with some points, but you didn't.
Okay. Andrew, do you want to respond to him on that, or you want to?
I think we missed like.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We were having an exchange. I missed the actual question.
I think his main criticism is he wants to know what your definition of insurrection is. Is that correct, caller?
Correct.
Yeah, it's not my burden.
Point on his definition of an insurrection.
It's not my burden.
Every which way to not answer that kind of a definition of question, and he's using the words "it's not my burden" to cop out of that definition question.
Okay, why? How is it my burden?
Feels an insurrection.
So let me ask you a question, caller. Okay, let's assume for a second I didn't know what murder was, and you were trying to give me the criteria for what murder was. Could I logically give you a criticism for why that actually would fit something else that I do know what it is better than the idea of murder? Do you understand that, caller?
Yes.
Well, then, what is your criticism?
I think what you're asking me is if something that you think fits another definition, would you be able to apply to that definition? And you could. However,
no, that's not what I'm asking
you're not providing an actual argument to that. Like, all you're saying is, well, this could fit something else, but you're not saying.
No, I'm giving what's called an internal critique. An internal critique doesn't necessitate an argument.
Hold on, this doesn't make sense.
An internal criticism.
If the debate has to do with whether or not a person was murdered, if that's the debate, was John murdered, and the entire debate is just you critiquing another person's definition of murder, but you're unwilling to put forth your own definition of murder, the implication is that you were never prepared to debate the actual topic of the debate, which is
that's not the implication. That doesn't even make any sense. So, Destiny, let me ask you a counter question.
And my argument is that is arguing in bad faith.
That's not only is that not arguing in bad faith.
I get really irritated by this. Oh, you're arguing bad faith. I think it's just a term people hear, and like when they don't like the answer, they just say, "Oh, you're arguing in bad faith." That's like that's why I think like 90. I don't think people understand what the actual argument, what the meaning of bad faith argument is. So we'll look that up. So a bad faith argument is a position that can be factually disproved, yet it is proponently continue to adhere to, or yet its proponent continues to adhere to it. So a bad faith argument would be we're having a debate over the sky is blue. I can factually prove that the sky is blue, or that water's wet, and we're debating the water's wet. I can factually or no, that's his disproof. Fuck. I don't really know how to explain this. Okay. So yeah, to argue in bad faith means your argument is not based on facts or like logic or something. So that, yeah. So, like if I give you a position and you could disprove my position, but I keep adhering to that position, then say you're arguing with me that water isn't wet. I can factually prove to you that water is wet, and you continue saying no, water isn't wet. Then that's a bad faith argument. There you go.
It's arguing in the best faith.
Okay, wait.
Destiny knew for sure that he had the burden, not me.
Destiny's thing. Next call. Let's get the next caller on.
Oh no! Wait! Quick, hold on, because this has to be answered. Hold on. How could you possibly deal with the topic if you don't have a definition of insurrection?
Well, let's try. I was just getting to that. So let me ask you, Destiny. Let us assume for a second that you weren't sure exactly what murder meant. You weren't exactly sure what the criteria was. Another person was calling this group of people a murderer, right? You had kind of an idea maybe of what that was. And so you went to them and you said, okay, can you tell me what you mean by murder? And they gave you some other criteria that fit way better with something other than their definition of murder. Why would that be illogical or in any way unreasonable?
That's not illogical and that's not unreasonable, but that would only mean that you would be successful if the debate is Destiny's definition of insurrection satisfactory insofar as defining January 6th as an insurrection. But that wasn't the debate topic. It wasn't just my definition of insurrection.
Yeah, it was.
The debate was, okay, wait. So do you agree that the prompt of the debate was January 6th an insurrection?
Yeah, why does that mean that I have
How can you answer that? Wait, do you not have to answer the prompt to a debate?
Yeah, so I'm not taking that. I'm neutral on it. It could have been. I was willing to concede.
Oh, you have no position?
I was willing to concede that it could have been. I said right in my opening, in good faith, I'll make concessions based under A, B, and C criteria if he can make these demonstrations. You never did.
Okay, so then just to be clear then, just so we're all, so the prompt for the debate was January 6th an insurrection, and I came in with a positive and you came in with no position.
No, it wasn't no position. It was that it's possible that it was, it's possible that it wasn't.
That's no
and
position.
I was willing to hear you. No, it's a neutral position. That's not no position.
That's
neutral
no position.
Is a position.
If somebody's looking, okay.
I'm sorry, is neutral not a position?
Not really, no.
Oh, no, not really. Does that mean no or yes, Destiny? Is neutral a position or isn't it?
For the purposes of having a debate, no.
Oh, for the purposes of having a debate, you can't have a neutral position. Destiny,
Stephen
Bonnell III, the best leftist debater on planet Earth, ladies and gentlemen, neutral on a debate topic is not a position.
Not to have as a debater. That's correct. If there's a debate saying, is God real? And one person shows up and says, I'm arguing the affirmative, God is real. And the other person says, I'm a neutral position on that.
Oh, I guess you've never debated with an agnostic before who's neutral. They're neutral.
Not in a debate on what that would be a debate on agnosticism or Gnosticism.
No,
not a debate on
if God is real
or not real.
Why couldn't you go into a debate agnostic about God being real or not real, Destiny? Can you explain that real quick?
Because definitionally, an agnostic doesn't take a position on or doesn't think they can have knowledge.
They do take a position. They take a neutral position.
They don't have the knowledge of God. So why would you debate a Gnostic person or somebody an agnostic person or somebody on Gnosticism who doesn't have a position on the existence of God?
So agnostics can't have a neutral position about whether or not God exists or not.
You wouldn't listen to a
Bonnell
debate somebody, a person who's agnostic, you wouldn't listen to the debate on whether or not God is real or not. They would say, oh, well, I can't have information about the existence of God. And you go, okay, well, I guess you wouldn't have this
then I guess 50% of the debates on modern day debate are incorrect because people have a neutral position, an agnostic position, like Matt Dillahunty, a guy you talked to, about whether or not God is real. Where Matt Dillahunty says, listen, I'm agnostic on it. He could be real. You just haven't demonstrated to me that he's real. Matt Dillahunty's wrong in all of those debates, right, Destiny?
He would be if that was the prompt of the debate. Yes, if the prompt of the debate was, is God real or not real?
I'm doing the triangle.
You come in and you go, oh, well, I'm agnostic. Then you go, okay, well, why the fuck are you in this debate? You don't have a position on it. Then bring in somebody that feels an atheist who wants to have a strong position of like he's not real, and then a theist who has a strong position. He is.
That makes no sense. You can still have a neutral position. That's absurd. I don't know how in the world are you the world's best leftist debater if you don't know you can take a neutral position?
This is like saying you want to have a debate between two people between who is God or what is God, and one person is is Catholic and the other person is an atheist. It's a nonsense position. Everybody knows this. This is like a debate.
Oh,
game
everybody
right now.
knows it, so
This
it's
is a
true.
debate game. Yeah.
Just like everybody knows it's an insurrection, even though they can't charge anybody.
I didn't
with
say everybody knows
right?
it's an insurrection. I said the historical record says it's an insurrection.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
All right. So now we just had Destiny saying you can't be neutral in a debate. You can't have a good faith debate and be neutral. We just have heard that, right? Basically what he says. Well, it's just happened today. So let's listen to this.
I totally agree with you guys. You can't go to a debate not having a position on something, right? You need to have a serious position in order to have a real debate, right?
Don't you think if you doubt like literally every single third-party organization that you should have some counter evidence that you can present?
No. Hold on. Wait. Hold on. You're getting lost. You do not need counter evidence to attack the validity or the sound.
Are you claiming an agnostic position on this? Are you?
I didn't say that. I'm just.
So
you don't need a position to counter a position that you believe is unsound. I don't need a position on that. If somebody comes in and they say, okay, here's my syllogism. 5 million people died yesterday to shark attacks, okay? And I know that because on TV, I was watching a cartoon where Dora said that 5 million people died. Therefore, my conclusion is 5 million people died to shark attacks. I can attack that argument all day and say this doesn't logically follow, and the premises aren't even true, so it's invalid and it's unsound. And then you can't go, oh, wait, so what's your position on it? I don't need to have a position to attack the validity of the other argument. My whole point is to show you the flawed methodology is being employed here.
Don't you think if you doubt like
Andrew's face is so fucking funny. Oh, it's so goddamn funny. So here we go. We got Destiny admitting that yes, you can go to a debate and have a debate, and someone can take a positive position in that debate, and you can attack that argument and not have a position. We just had him admitting that. Let's listen.
like literally every single third
No. No. No, no way. No way. Let's listen to it again.
Don't you think if you doubt like literally every single third-party organization that you should have some counter evidence that you can present?
No. Hold on. Wait. Hold on. You're getting lost. You do not need counter evidence to attack the validity or the sound.
Are you claiming an agnostic position on this? Are you?
I didn't say that. I'm just.
So
you don't need a
position
position to counter a position that you believe is unsound. I don't need a position on that. If somebody comes in and they say, okay, syllogism. 5 million people died yesterday to shark attacks, okay? And I know that because on TV, I was watching a cartoon where Dora said that 5 million people died. Therefore, my conclusion is 5 million people died to shark attacks. I can attack that argument all day and say this doesn't logically follow, and the premises aren't even true, so it's invalid and it's unsound. And then you can't go, oh, wait, so what's your position on it? I don't need to have a position to attack the validity of the other argument.
Wait a second. Wait a second. You don't need to have a position to attack the other argument.
All right, there we go. So that's the end of that. So we got Destiny himself admitting that no, you do not need a position to attack someone's position. So someone can come in with a positive position, and you can attack that position and not need a position of your own. So there we go. So Destiny just continues to lose and lose and lose. But what do you guys think? Do you think Destiny won? Do you think Andrew won? Who do you think won? I think Andrew won, 100%. And I am a little biased, yes. But I think it's very clear that Andrew won. The fact that Destiny says you can't insurrect against the state because there's been no evidence of being of someone insurrecting against the state. He kept adding, federal law wasn't in his original definition. Kept adding that just because he realized he was losing. And then again, if you took all those elements that Destiny laid out, and then you went and and then, but you only applied it at the state level. Would that not be an insurrection? But no, apparently, I mean, I guess according to Destiny, no, because it's a state level. But if a bunch of a bunch of hippies smoke pot and kick some shit around and light some stuff on fire and are resisting a federal law against not smoking marijuana on federal land, well, then that is an insurrection. It's so ridiculous. But yeah, make sure you guys like the video. I hope you enjoyed it. And I know at some point I got distracted with a chatter and talking about Rittenhouse, which was not important, but I enjoyed that, and I have a strong opinion about that whole situation. But yeah, I hope you guys again enjoy the video. Make sure you like, give me a follow, and I hope you have a good day. Peace out. See you later.